Chapter 196. Chapter 196. Paying Compensation. Ling Han and Hunyo both wreaked great havoc. With a punch and a kick, the mayhem began, starting from the main doors onwards. Whatever they saw, they destroyed, creating a path of ruin and destruction towards the main hall, leaving wreckage and damage behind them. Of course, there were even more members of the Earth and Water faction who had jumped out to stop them. But Ling Han had hired as many as 100 gushing tear martial artists, and now was the time to make use of them. They too jumped out and blocked the incoming attacks, ensuring Ling Han's safety. When Ling Han led his path of destruction all the way to the main hall, what was originally a beautiful garden and an elegant corridor was already in complete disorder. Ruined flowers were here and there. Broken pieces of the pillars were all over the floor. It was as if there was a demolition project going on in this place. "Stop it!" A mighty voice was heard, and a tall old man appeared. There was an endless frosty and powerful aura exuding from his whole body, filled with the forceful air of a person who had occupied a high social rank for a long time. It was the faction leader of the Earth and Water faction, whose cultivation level was in the 5th layer of spiritual ocean tier. Everyone could not help but stop moving. The reputation of a person was like the shadow cast by a tree. No matter what, Yang Tiandu was still the leader of a faction, and so naturally had his own influence. However, it seems that his influence and reputation had no obvious effect on the demolishing duo. Guang, Peng, Guang. Ling Han and Hunyo were very much enjoying the process of spreading damage, and there were even more things that could be broken in the main hall, such as tables, chairs, vases, screens, and so on. Especially in Hunyo's case, she had been raised by a ferocious beast in the first place, so there was a thirst for blood and destruction flowing in her veins. This nature had only been temporarily repressed at Ling Han's side, and was now being slowly set free. She bared her little canines, fully displaying her fierce nature, as if she herself was a little tiger. "I told you two to stop!" Yang Tiandu shouted in fury. His voice became a ripple that swept out towards Ling Han and Hunyo. Hunyo's figure twisted and dodged, as if she could teleport, and actually managed to dodge the sound wave created by this shout miraculously. Meanwhile, Ling Han's left hand moved, and the blood-sucking origin gold transformed into a concave mirror. The power of the sound wave collected in front of it and was reflected back in a straight line. With a PU, it actually crushed the legs of a nearby member of the Earth and Water faction into a foam of blood. Ling Han withdrew the origin gold, shook his head, and said, "Leader Yang is indeed unrivaled in your power. Merely one shout, and you can actually liquefy the flesh and blood of a human being. You truly deserve the name of an elite in spiritual ocean tier. However, why had you attacked your own people? Could it be he cuckolded you?" Even if Yang Tiandu was a subtle person by nature, he could not help but turn green after hearing such words. He said coldly, "Brat, a loose tongue may cause a lot of trouble. You're definitely going to die today." He suddenly moved, moving as fast as a lightning bolt. With a single leap, he was right in front of Ling Han and stretched out his hand in a strike. "Get lost!" Guang Yuan moved, becoming a golden Buddha. He struck out with a palm strike, and golden light filled the air. Pum! The two elites clashed head-on for a single strike, and both of them were slightly trembling from the force. Then they each took 7 steps back. However, Guang Yuan's expression changed slightly, and he took another step back and finally managed to steady his footing. This was because he suffered from an ailment. If not, he would definitely not have been at a disadvantage in this clash. Shatter a mountain with 7 punches, Guang Yuan. With one glance, Yang Tiandu recognized his opponent. "Sword of Rioting Shadows, Yang Tiandu," Guang Yuan said calmly. Yang Tiandu could not help but become cautious. Guang Yuan was also in the 5th layer of spiritual ocean tier. Though the latter had been at a slight disadvantage in that clash of blows just now, if there was another person who joined forces with him, that would be enough to oppose him. Ling Han had in total 7 spiritual ocean tier elites on his side, while he only had 3 on his side. In terms of numbers, he was at too much of a disadvantage. Brother Guang Yuan, why do you need to involve yourself with this nasty business? Why don't you choose to stand by and do nothing? And in return, I shall owe you a debt. Agreed? Yang Tian-du decided to restrain his displeasure for the moment. Guang Yuan laughed disdainfully and said, "Is the great leader Yang not aware of the grand reputation of the earth and water faction? I dare not accept a debt from you." Yang Tian-du was so angry he was shaking. This was completely ridiculing him. However, Guang Yuan's words took a swift turn. "We are only hired to protect young Master Han. As long as young Master Han is unharmed, we would of course not make a move. Thus, why won't the great leader Yang give us all some face and let Ling Han take a walk around here and go for a look around, and we can just enjoy some tea and chat in the meanwhile? How about it? How about it, your sister?" All the members of the Earth and Water faction looked like they wanted to commit murder. This walk of Ling Han was not the slightest bit peaceful. From the moment he had entered, he had started his path of destruction, and was even worse than a gang of bandits suddenly set upon them. If they allowed him to walk around for a while, then would there be an undamaged tile left in the headquarters of the Earth and Water faction? Yang Tian-du's eyes swept over the group, and his eyes suddenly lit up. He asked, "Everyone, you only need to ensure the safety of this young man, right?" Naturally, Guang Yuan and the others nodded. "Then this young girl and the little girl should not be included in your protection, right?" A cold smirk curled around the corners of Yang Tian-du's lips. He was talking about Lu Yutong and Hu Niu. Indeed, no. Guang Yuan and the others shook their heads. Good. Yang Tian-du gave a wave of his hand, pointed at Lu Yutong and Hu Niu, and commanded, "Apprehend the 2 of them!" He calmed down and lifted his teacup for a sip, feeling that everything was back under his control. Yes, faction leader. The members of the Earth and Water faction all got the wind back into their sails. They had finally found a weakness and could finally turn the tables and get back into control. Ling Han laughed and said, "Allow me to introduce. This beautiful young miss has the surname of Lu and the given name of Yutong. She is the princess of the Lu clan of the 8 great clans. Hee, I am really impressed, great leader Yang. You are indeed very brave to actually dare to make a move on even the young miss of the Lu clan. Awesome. There would definitely be no one else with such overwhelming courage like you." Pooh! Yang Tian-du instantly spat out a mouthful of hot tea. How could Lu Yu, who had been beside him, foreseen such a sneak attack? As a result, his whole face was covered with tea. His eyebrows, hair, and beard were all stuck onto his face. Stop! Yang Tian-du did not have the time to comfort Lu Yu and hurriedly shouted at his underlings to stop. If they actually dared to come to blows with the princess of the Lu clan, then most likely the powerful elites of the Lu clan would soon come over and turn the whole Earth and Water faction upside down. It is indeed the young miss of the Lu clan. I've seen her once before. She's one of the twin pearls of the Imperial City. Who would not have heard of her? She is indeed shockingly beautiful. Why would she be with such a detestable brat? The people of the Earth and Water faction mumbled amongst themselves. Even the princess of the Lu clan was involved. They seemed to smell a scent of danger. Could it be that the Lu clan was displeased with them and had deliberately sent Ling Han over to give them a little punishment? Don't misunderstand. Ling Han smiled slightly and took the initiative to explain. This has nothing to do with the Lu clan. The reason I came today is actually very simple. Last night you guys crashed my... Yutong, how many of our stores have been crashed? 47, Lu Yutong instantly answered. You guys crashed 47 of my stores, so I have come today to get some justice. Ling Han grinned. How much do you intend to pay to compensate for my loss? Fuck, you came to make damage and destruction at the Earth and Water faction, and actually want us to give you an explanation. The people of the Earth and Water faction were all furious at this. They usually bullied the commoners and acted tyrannical on the streets, doing all kinds of bad deeds. They could be considered quite shameless people themselves. But now they realized that compared with Ling Han's shamelessness, they paled in comparison. You came to make trouble at our faction, and still want our faction to pay you compensation. Yang Tiandu was so extremely furious that he laughed, his tone cold and dark. Not paying. Ling Han grinned. Then I'll just continue to spread destruction. Chapter 197. Chapter 197. Reporting to the authorities. Quang, Quang, Quang. Ling Han moved and mercilessly went back to his path of destruction. Hu Niu had already returned to Ling Han's side to avoid being ambushed by the Earth and Water faction. If she were captured and held hostage, then Ling Han would still be slightly troubled. Stop! The men of Earth and Water faction once again tried to stop him, but one move from them, and Guang Yuan and his group would move as well, creating a domino effect and once again inciting the start of a battle royale. Please do not make things difficult for us, fellows, Guang Yuan and his group said. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. There were already some men of the Earth and Water faction who had spat out blood in their overwhelming rage. It was this brat who had first come to their place to make trouble. But why were they the ones being advised not to make a move and create trouble for him? Was there any such logic in this world? Whatever Ling Han saw, he would smash. Hu Niu had transformed into a creature of violence and destroyed the furniture and ornaments in the place, reducing them to an indescribable state. Though there were only two of them, one adult and one child, but how could the destructive power of gushing spring tear be taken lightly? And this vase is not bad. Ling Han picked up a vase, and with a quang, it had shattered into 100 pieces. He shrugged and said, my hand slipped. Quang, and another delicate vase was shattered. My hand slipped again. Quang, why is my hand so slippery today? Great leader Yang, whenever you have made the decision to compensate me, you can come over and discuss it with me. Ling Han said with a smile as he smashed a painting that had been hanging on the wall of the main hall into pieces, causing Hu Niu to clap her hands in delight. Because the painting depicted a fierce tiger with white eyes that had been hung up, it had obviously offended the little girl. Yang Tiandu's face was dark and cold. After gritting his teeth for a moment, he said, Make a report to the Imperial Guards. Tell them that someone has trespassed into our residence illegally and is committing a crime here. Leader. The members of the Earth and Water faction all exclaimed in shock. If they actually reported this to the Imperial Guards, then what would be left of their reputation? They were a great faction, and were actually forced by a young man to the extent that they had to get the Imperial Guards to solve the issue. If this news spread out, then what pride would they have left? Do you think that it'll help our pride to have this kind of situation continue? Yang Tiandu humphed. The rest all immediately fell silent. That's right. Ling Han was currently very much enjoying his destruction and devastation, yet they could only stand by and watch helplessly. If the situation continued, was this anything to be proud of? I'll go. Lu Yu gritted his teeth and accepted this mission. He really could not bear to just stand by and watch helplessly as Ling Han continued on his path of devastation, so he might as well leave. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Then it's up to you, Elder Lu, Yang Tiandu said. Lu Yu left. Now that they were at this level, the people of the Earth and Water faction decided they might as well get over it, and simply wait for the Imperial Guards to deal with Ling Han. One had to know that the Empire had its own laws. Publicly destroying the private residence of another was also quite a serious crime. After only about half an hour, Lu Yu returned with a troop of several dozen imperial guards. Though they were not a large number, and the one walking in the lead was only in gushing spring tear, their identity as imperial guards was still there. Would Guangyuan and his group still dare to go against these imperial guards? If they dared to make a move, that would mean becoming an enemy of the empire, and that equated to a major offense of treason. The men of the Earth and Water faction had never been so desperate to see the imperial guards until this moment. Their eyes had turned red in their excitement, and they went up to receive them. Their greetings and reception were so warm that the imperial guards experienced a bit of a shock. These guys were smiling in a way that was a bit scary. We're all men here. Why are you grabbing onto my hand and still not letting go? Could it be that you're interested in me? Captain Zhua! Yang Tian-du greeted the minor captain of the Imperial Guards and said, "There is a madman creating great damage in this place of mine and disregards the laws of the Empire entirely. Please arrest him and punish him severely according to the laws." Captain Zhua looked strangely at him and asked, "With your ability, you are still unable to apprehend this madman, Master Yang?" The members of the Earth and Water faction all flushed, while Yang Tian-du simply said composedly, "We are all good citizens who obey the laws, so how could we so easily resort to force? Our first reaction was naturally to make a report to Captain Zhua and get the Imperial Guards to arrest the criminal. This is the natural course of events and abides by the laws of our nation." TSK, TSK, TSK. How nice these words sound. Captain Zhua's face twitched violently. He was naturally aware of the kind of characters that were in the Earth and Water faction. When he heard Yang Tian-du call himself a good citizen, he suddenly felt an urge to throw up. Thankfully, he managed to repress this urge. Otherwise, if he had really thrown up over Yang Tian-du, then it would not be easily explained even if he were minor captain of the Imperial Guards. Ha ha ha! Leader Yang's tolerance is really impressive, making me think of an animal called the tortoise. Guangyuan laughed loudly. If Leader Yang returns home one day and sees a lecherous criminal trying to do that to your beautiful little concubine, would Leader Yang still abide by the laws of the Empire and first make a report to the Imperial Guards? Naturally. One of the other lone cultivators laughed as well. But is it really good to be cuckolded like this? Who knows? Perhaps Master Yang has never had any children all these years, and so would bear being cuckolded just to become a happy father. Ha 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 ha. The rest of the lone cultivators did not hold much respect for anyone in the first place, so they too joined in on the raucous laughter. Yang Tian-du was so enraged he was shaking. However, he only pretended he had not heard anything, and said, "Captain Zhua, please uphold justice." "All right." Captain Zhua agreed. This was part of his duties. "Where is the madman?" "There." Yang Tian-du pointed at a place where smoke and dust was wafting out from. Obviously, Ling Han was currently creating damage there. Captain Zhua waved his hand and brought his men over. After a moment, he finally spotted Ling Han and Hunyao, who were in the midst of their fun and delighting in their destruction. Instantly, his heart trembled. He had seen Ling Han's portrait before. That was when a strict command had come from his superiors. As long as Ling Han did not do something atrocious like committing murder, then no matter what other things he did, the Imperial Guards were to turn a blind eye to it, and if he encountered any danger, they were to even help him out. "Captain Zhua, please act quickly to avoid a greater loss," Yang Tian-du said from the side, for there was suddenly no movement from Captain Zhua. Captain Zhua gave a sigh, shook his head, and said, "I don't have the ability to deal with this issue." "What?" Yang Tian-du had a sudden urge to go on a rampage. "Not even the Imperial Guards were able to deal with this. Are you messing around with me?" "Master Yang, you're on your own." Captain Zhua revealed a meaningful smile. "Additionally, let me give Master Yang a word of warning. You must definitely not injure this person. Otherwise, I would have no choice but to arrest you." "Fuck." Yang Tiandu was currently feeling very depressed. He invited the Imperial Guards over to help him out, but now they were actually all on the other side. How could he endure this? Captains did not say anything else. With a wave of his hand, the several dozen men all stood at one side, as if they were there to keep Yang Tiandu under surveillance. All of a sudden, the members of the Earth and Water faction cursed Captain Zhua and all his ancestors. How could they be bullied to this extent? Peng, peng, peng. On the other side, Ling Han and Hu Niu were still causing great damage and destruction. And from the looks of it, they would not desist unless the whole Earth and Water faction was destroyed. Yang Tiandu sighed, closed his eyes, and curled his hands into fists. Because he had used too much strength, his hands were slightly trembling. After a moment, he snapped open his eyes and said, "Young Master Han, let us come and discuss the matter of compensation." He decided to yield. There was no other way. If it was a clash of power, Ling Han had 7 spiritual ocean tier elites and 100 gushing spring tier martial artists behind him, which was enough to dominate the Earth and Water faction. If they went the official route, Ling Han was even more awesome. The Imperial Guards not only did not deal with the issue, but would also step up to protect him. What else could he do then? Ha 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 ha. Guang Yuan and his group laughed loudly. Leader Yang's divine art of the tortoise is indeed practiced to the point of perfection. You can really pull back so smoothly and so easily. I'm impressed. I definitely wouldn't be able to learn this art. Chapter 198. Chapter 198. Agree to compensate. Reverie under Sir. Faced with these mockeries and ridicules, Earth and Water factions members could only silently endure all kinds of insults, letting people slap their face. Ling Han stopped, looked at Yang Tiandu and laughed. "Leader Yang, how do you plan to compensate me?" Yang Tiandu's teeth crackled, but circumstances prevail over men, so he said solemnly, 100,000 silvers. As he said the words, he only felt a burn on his face, as if someone slapped him fiercely. He was the master of a faction, and a formidable spiritual ocean tier, Cultivatorho, would have thought he'd lower his head to an element gathering tier youngster. This was a great humiliation. Ling Hang laughed aloud, then said, "Leader Yang, are you dismissing a beggar? Based on Earth and Water faction's affluence and power, you ought to pay several million silvers, right?" "Bullcrap." Yang Tiandu almost threw a fit. "Several million silvers. Why don't you go rob that?" Earth and Water faction was equivalent to a middle-class clan, and because they were willing to do dirty work, their income was certainly more than that of a middle-class clan. Ling Han quoted several millions right off the bat. How could he not be agitated? Even if the entire Earth and Water faction was sold, he wouldn't be able to get that sum of money. "Impossible," he said definitively. Honestly, 100,000 silvers already hurt his heart. If there wasn't another way, how could he submit? Ling Han laid out his hands and said, "Anyways, I've plenty of time to sit here and drink tea, watch a show, and wait for Leader Yang to change your mind." Bam, bam, bam. Hu Niu was still causing mass destruction. The little girl was a human-shaped monster despite ramming into walls, which fell one after another. She remained unscathed, laughing and enjoying herself greatly. If it was before, Yang Tiandu might have taken down Hu Niu, but having seen the Imperial Guard's attitude, he knew that Ling Han had an incredibly scary background. This time he could only swallow the insult bitterly. He waved people over, and after understanding the details of the situation, he said, "Young Master Han, this faction knows not which stores belong to you. One who does not know is not guilty. We are willing to fully compensate. So please, young Master Han, have the generosity to let this go." As for the matter of Earth and Water faction being trashed, he naturally did not bring it up and just accepted it as a lesson for provoking someone he shouldn't. Of course, he could still get Cheng Yunxiang to pay. Cheng family caused this trouble to begin with. Earth and Water faction's disciples all revealed embarrassed and angry expressions. but dared not speak due to Ling Han's influence. They only felt that it was the most shameful day of their lives. Ling Han swept them with a glance and said, "You guys refused to accept it? Why were you guys so insensible yesterday then, to have started trouble at my property? But Leader Yang is willing to compromise, so I'll give you a chance. Pay 100,000 silvers first, then tear down Qin family's stores every day." Yang Tiandu looked at Captain Zhua and said, "We are fine subjects that respect justice and abide by the law. Don't start this nonsense." Ling Han resolutely shook his hands in admonition and said, "I don't mind staying here for a while longer." Looking at Yang Tiandu suffer humiliation, Earth and Water factions disciples felt miserable and angry, wishing to run right up to tear Ling Han to pieces. However, seeing the Imperial Guards that were running them down with unfriendly gazes, they had to abandon their intentions. Good. Yang Tiandu was unexpectedly straightforward, coming to a resolution quickly and gritting his teeth in agreement. He waved his hand, and very quickly a man came carrying an embroidered box. After receiving it, he threw it to Ling Han. Ling Han opened it to see 10 silver notes lying inside, each of 10,000 denomination. He smiled slightly, walked in front of Captain Zhua, handed over the silver notes, and said, "Captain Zhua, this is a small token of appreciation for the trouble in coming over. Eat sumptuously afterwards." Hiss, this guy was a bit too generous. That was 100,000 silvers, not 10 pieces of toilet paper. Captains were promptly declined and said, "No need, no need. Protecting the citizens' safety is our obligation as Imperial Guards." Hearing those words made Earth and Water factions disciples want to beat someone. Why didn't you say anything when Ling Han acted violently? How extremely partial. Take it. I can't let you brothers come for nothing. Ling Han shoved the silver notes to him. For him, 100,000 silvers was like a drizzle. Besides, this was Earth and Water factions' tainted money, which he didn't want to touch at all. Only then did Captain Zhua put away the silver notes, filled with gratitude towards Ling Han. Even though he couldn't take all 100,000 for himself, as he'd have to hand over the majority upwards when he returned, he could still get 10,000 or so, a decent amount of easy money. Yang Tiandu's face twitched. That was his money, but it was used by Ling Han to pretend to be generous, and yet he didn't even receive a thank you. "Young Master Han, you're satisfied now, right?" He had to endure the extreme humiliation, the veins on his forehead popping out. Ling Han laughed lightly and said, "I suppose so. Leader Yang, don't forget my earlier demands if I see any of Chen family's stores still open. Then I'll take these friends here for some tea. I definitely won't let young Master Han down." Yang Tiandu grumbled, almost to the point of roaring. "Now, you can let that little girl stop." He pointed at Hunyao. Ling Han had stopped, but the little girl didn't, and she was still knocking down wall after wall. After a wall got knocked down, she would laugh endearingly like it was very fun. Ling Han laughed aloud and said, "Nyo, time to go home. I still want to play." The little girl showed that she was not yet content. "Let's go eat meat." Ling Han tempted. "Meat, meat, meat." Hunyao immediately hopped on and hung on Ling Han like a monkey. "Everyone will meet again as long as time stands." Ling Han walked off, swaggeringly. Guang Yuan and the rest followed him. Naturally, the Imperial Guards retreated right after, leaving Earth and Water factions people too pained for even tears as they beheld the scene of desolation in their headquarters. Ling Han first went to Heavenly Martial Palace to update the request as finished, so that the masses could receive their pay. "Young Master Han, thank you. If you have assignments like this hereafter, remember to call us brothers." The people talked to him one after another. It was just a fight without any risks, and they earned 10,000. This assignment was definitely good. The assignments they accepted previously, like going to a robber's den to kill someone, were filled with danger which could easily get them killed. They were basically using their lives to make money. The several formidable spiritual ocean tier cultivators all made an exception and smiled at Ling Han. A financial backer like Ling Han was someone even they wanted to be on friendly terms with, but they were embarrassed to express it too overtly due to their status of martial artists in spiritual ocean tier. Everyone dispersed, but Guang Yuan stayed behind as he still had to consult Ling Han about the problems with his cultivation. "Tell me, what do you want me to do?" Guang Yuan said. Although he complied to be hired by Ling Han, he also received pay, so he obviously had to find another way to solve the issue on cultivation. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Be my attendant for a year." Chapter 199. Chapter 199. Subduing Guang Yuan. Reverie underscore. Guang Yuan immediately snorted and said, "A tiny element gathering tier martial artist like you has the impudence to ask me to be your attendant?" He was a cultivator at the formidable spiritual ocean tier, and what sort of concept is that? Right above spiritual ocean tier was spiritual pedestal tier, which was the strongest tier in the 8 large noble families and royal family. In other words, in Rain Country, there were only several hundred of those that could firmly suppress Guang Yuan. Rain Country's population was around 100 million, ranking in the top 100 out of 100 million. That was really kick-ass, wasn't it? "Change the condition," he said. "Then be my bodyguard for a year." Ling Han readily offered another condition. What difference was there? Guang Yuan opened his eyes wide. He had the urge to smack someone, but as he thought that Ling Han still had large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll secrets, he had to restrain his temper. Change to another one. "Say, old brother Guang, you're too picky. A no on the left and a no on the right. Just forget it. I'm too lazy to spend my thoughts on this." Ling Han shrugged and was about to take Hunyo's hand to leave. After he walked 2 steps, he turned his head to say to Guang Yuan, "Old brother Guang, what are you suggesting by grabbing onto my clothes? Was this lord pulling on you? Which eye did you see that with?" Guang Yuan lied brazenly. Ling Han laughed aloud and said, "Old brother Guang, if I don't help you with your cultivation technique, you won't let me go. If you want to leave, just leave. This lord isn't a robber. How could I force you to stay here?" Guang Yuan spoke frankly and righteously, but his hand was clutching onto the corner of Ling Han's clothes, unwilling to let go. Ling Han laughed mischievously and said, "Old brother Guang, just 1 year as a bodyguard, but in exchange there's hope for you to enter the spiritual pedestal tier. Do you think you'd lose out on this deal?" Guang Yuan frowned. "Can you really promise that I'll break through to spiritual pedestal tier?" Unknowingly, he chose to believe this youngster's facile remark. So what if he resolves the hidden injuries breaking through to spiritual pedestal tier was still incomparably difficult? There were only so many spiritual pedestal tier cultivators in Rain Country, all of whom belonged to the imperial family and 8 great clans with the rare exception of other powerful parties, such as Heaven's Medicine Pavilion and Huyang Academy. It was unheard of for a lone cultivator to earn such an achievement. "Three Yang breaks heaven. Origin's lock is layered," Ling Han suddenly quoted. Guang Yuan's complexion instantly changed, and he said, "How do you know large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll's verbal chant?" "How strange. If I didn't know, then how would I fix your problem?" Ling Han smiled faintly. Guang Yuan sighed and said, "You win." This boy kept his calm, appearing to have a sure hold of him. "Old brother Guang, don't be disappointed. You'll understand later that this is the best choice you've made in your entire life." Ling Han laughed. Guang Yuan shook his head and said in helplessness, "Boy, you don't look like a master who settles in his place. This lord acting as your bodyguard will most definitely encounter some danger, maybe even handing over my life. Don't worry, at most a little danger. Death is impossible." Ling Han patted his shoulder. "Whatever. Now that this lord has already decided to ride on your pirate ship, there's no need to think more of it." Guang Yuan was one who unexpectedly met gains and losses with equanimity, no longer fussing over being Ling Han's bodyguard for a year. Ling Han said, "3 yang breaks heaven. Origin's lock is layered. This verbal chant is the problem when you cultivate. I met a person who was just like you, understanding those words as sealing origin power within the 3rd backbone. This certainly can increase explosiveness, but with time it will cause immense damage. If you continue to cultivate this way, in no less than 3 years, your backbone will collapse and you'll become a cripple." Guang Yuan couldn't help but be moved. For a formidable spiritual ocean tier, cultivator, once their cultivation progress was lost, it was no different from dying. Moreover, with his recalcitrant personality, he often offended many people, and once he lost his cultivation, many people would definitely beat him when he was down. The terrible result of that need not be said. "May I ask young Master Han how this verbal chant should be interpreted?" He lowered his posture to seek guidance from Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. Speaking of which, it really was coincidental. In his previous life, he met someone who cultivated the large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll and also derailed on that phrase of the verbal formula. Moreover, the situation back then was much worse as the man's backbone was completely shattered. He was entrusted to refine a heaven-grade pill that restored bones. Under careful consideration, he also took time to understand large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll to be absolutely safe, and that was how he was able to see through Guang Yuan's problem with a glance. "Then let us talk it over," Ling Han said. After a few minutes, Guang Yuan revealed a faithful look. With each expression, he became more solemn and respectful. In his mind, Ling Han's status rose infinitely. To know large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll was already impressive, but he obtained the incomplete scroll in an ancient tomb. Knowing the technique was one thing, one only needed a superb memory to remember it. However, Ling Han surpassed the level of learning by rote, being even more knowledgeable about it than he was. It made him feel sudden enlightenment at times, with some parts that he normally didn't understand instantly becoming clear. No wonder Ling Han said that he had a chance to advance into spiritual pedestal tier. Ling Han's understanding was like that of a martial artist master, which made him feel extremely small. Ling Han took a glance at him and revealed a smile. Subduing Guang Yuan was only on a whim, as he considered Feng Yan's threat and how Wu Songlin and Fu Yuanshen couldn't wander behind his but all day. However, at most in 1 year, he would definitely reach spiritual ocean tier, and Guang Yuan would naturally be unable to help him. So he set the period of a year. As for whether Guang Yuan wanted to leave or not, then that'd be based on whether or not he had the heart to take him under his wing. Guang Yuan had to make arrangements, so he promised to go find Ling Han 3 days later at Huyang Academy. A formidable spiritual ocean tier cultivator has so easily fallen under your control. Lu Yutang still somewhat couldn't believe it. A mere spiritual ocean tier. Ling Hang sighed. Put in his previous life, he wouldn't even want a spiritual ocean tier to watch his door, but he was too weak right now, so he'd have to make do with spiritual ocean tier. Lu Yutang rolled her eyes. If a formidable spiritual ocean tier cultivator entered Lu family, it'd be guaranteed that Lu family's top brass would welcome him and shower with heavy promises. "Will you die if you don't show off?" "I'll be Ling Han's bodyguard, too," Hunyao said, unwilling to be outdone. Ling Han laughed aloud and said, "Good, from now on, I'll rely on Hunyao for protection." Hunyao instantly cracked a smile, appearing to be very happy. After the 3 returned to the academy, Lu Yutang returned to her quarters, and Ling Han held Hunyao's hand and returned to their courtyard. From afar, he saw a girl guarding the door, glancing around with an expression full of angst. It was Yun Shuang. "What is Madame Yen inviting me for a meal?" Ling Han smiled as he said, "Please, young Master Han, save me." Yun Shuang kneeled abruptly onto the ground. Chapter 200. Chapter 200, Lady Yan's Plans. What's the matter? Ling Han asked. Yun Shuang only continued to weep. Thankfully, this place was quite remote. Otherwise, anyone would have thought Ling Han was bullying her. If you don't tell me, how am I supposed to help you? Fine, finish crying, then tell me. Ling Han opened the door and went back in. Right when he was about to close the door, Yun Shuang squeezed in and grabbed onto the corner of his shirt with a delicate hand. I say, why do all of you like to grab onto the corner of my shirt? It's understandable if it was Nyo, but men do this and women do this too. I am really troubled by this, Ling Han said, shaking his head. Nyo gave a strong nod and made her opinion clear. Ling Han is Nyo's. Milady, It was obvious Yun Shuang was not in the mood for jokes. She had just opened her mouth to explain when she started to cry again. Ling Han sighed and said, In 3 breaths' time, if you still persist in sniveling, I'll throw you out. So mean. Lu Ru'er walked out of the house and glared harshly at Ling Han. And it seems that it would not be enough to just simply throw one out. Ling Han shuffled his sleeves. Haha, damn scoundrel, let me tell you. I have already recovered about 70% of my cultivation, and no longer need to fear your threats. Lu Ru'er said proudly. Then why aren't the 2 of you quickly getting lost? Everything you eat and use every day is mine. Don't you know all that needs money? Ling Han said in irritation. Lu Ru'er instantly exploded in anger. She felt that this guy did not have the slightest inclination to feel tender and protective towards women. It was obvious that she and her sister were rare beauties, but this guy did not bear any ideas or intentions towards them at all. What a weirdo. Could it be that he preferred men? That was possible. Otherwise, how could he simply ignore the charm of her sister and her? When she thought about this, she could not help but feel a shiver all over her body. But after being interrupted by the banter between the 2 of them, Yun Shuang finally regained her composure and said, Please take me in, young Master Han. Shuang has no other place to go. Ling Han was startled and said, Aren't you of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion? But you actually came here to beg me for shelter. What kind of logic is that? Do you all think that my place is a garbage collection ground? 1, 2, and now 3. And who knows if there will be even more in the future. Lu Ru'er was instantly furious and said, Who are you calling garbage? Young Master Han, milady. Milady is too cruel. Yun Shuang once again began to weep. All right. Just calm yourself and speak slowly. Start from the beginning. Don't keep speaking in one breath and crying in the next. Otherwise, I really wouldn't be able to stand it, Ling Han said. Come, sit down first. Lu Ru'er rolled her eyes at Ling Han and helped Yun Shuang into the house. After helping her to sit down, she even fetched a cup of hot tea to calm Yun Shuang down. Ling Han looked at Nyo, and Nyo looked back at him. The 2 simultaneously shrugged. They were the real owners, but why was it they seemed more like outsiders here? Yun Shuang held onto the cup of tea and rested for a while before finally opening her mouth and telling her story. Yen Tianzhao managing to awake was supposed to be a good thing, but for Yun Shuang it was the beginning of her nightmare. She had coincidentally eavesdropped on a conversation between Lady Yan and Yen Tianzhao. It seemed that it was not because Lady Yan wanted a place to invest her energy and hopes into that she had been adopted. Instead, there had been a different motive for her adoption right from the beginning. She was a furnace. Lady Yan most likely knew that her son would not be able to awaken for quite some time, but there was only so much optimal time for cultivation for a martial artist. So how could she allow her son to lag behind at the starting line? It just so happened that she had obtained an unusual cultivation technique that was divided into 2 main and subsidiary techniques. The subsidiary technique was to be cultivated by one person, while the main technique was to be cultivated by another. When the time came, as long as the two people cultivated together, then the person who had cultivated the main technique would be able to easily swallow the person who had cultivated the subsidiary technique, her cultivation, and even vitality. And the cultivation technique that she had practiced since her childhood was precisely the subsidiary technique, in order for her to pave the way for Yin Tianzhao. The reason why they had not taken action immediately was because Yin Tianzhao had only just awakened and had just begun to cultivate the main technique. As long as he was slightly accomplished in his cultivation, they would take action. And by that time, not only would Yun Shuang lose all her cultivation, she would also lose her vitality. She would, in an extremely short period of time, become an old woman. If Milady had treated me sincerely, I am willing to die for Milady, no questions asked. But I can't accept this. Yun Shuang had cried so much, her eyes were red. She's so evil, too evil. Lu Ru'er wiped her tears as well where she was standing. She was so easily moved to tears that Ling Han mocked her inside his head. Hey, you're an assassin, okay? Don't be so emotional, all right? Ling Han pondered for a moment, then said, Lady Yen has been active for so many years and must have a very wide system of connections and a similarly wide information network in the Imperial City. The fact that you're staying here would not be able to stay hidden for very long. At that time, when Lady Yen comes to seek you out, would you be able to resist? If she decided that she wanted to take her adopted daughter with her, that would be a right and proper thing. Even the laws of the Empire would side with Lady Yen if Ling Han attempted to stop her. Then it would be he who had kidnapped her daughter. Ling Han had his backers, but so did Lady Yen, and her backer was also very powerful. Yun Shuang could not help but pale and began to shudder. She would rather die than be taken back by Lady Yen. That's right. Those two girls should have mostly recovered from their injuries. Why don't you go with them and leave Rain Country? Ling Han suggested to Yun Shuang. That would be great. He'd be able to solve 3 huge problems in one go. Who told you we were leaving Rain Country? Lu Ru'er leaped up. I am definitely going to kill that traitor. I think you're more likely to die than kill anyone. Ling Han pointed out, dampening her enthusiasm, and continued, It would be better if the two of you return and work hard on your cultivation. Su Kexian has been deceived once, so she would definitely not fall into the trap a second time. The two of you no longer have the chance to set up a trap to ambush her. Lu Ru'er pouted. She wanted to argue, but knew that Ling Han was telling the truth. The power gap between the two of them and Su Kexian was too large, and they had also lost the advantage of taking the initiative. Thus, it was practically impossible for them to once again attempt to assassinate Su Kexian. Mr. Ling is right. Lu Feng walked out as well and said, When we finally recover from our injuries, we will immediately leave Rain Country. We are extremely grateful for how you have taken care of us for this period of time, and hope that there will be a chance for us two sisters to repay your kindness, Mr. Ling. It would be the best repayment for me if you leave, Ling Han said bluntly. Hu Niu nodded seriously as well. This detestable guy. Lu Ru'er humphed and said, Scoundrel, if you come to Fire Country in the future and get into trouble, remember to look for us. We will definitely take very good care of you. She emphasized the words very good heavily. Obviously, she held a big grudge towards him. All right, you can stay with the two sisters for tonight and leave after a few days, Ling Han said to Yun Shuang, pretending he had not heard anything. Thank you, young Master Han. Thank you, Mrs. Yun Shuang lowered into a bow. Pung, pung, pung. It was at this moment that there came a knock on the door, causing the four of them to be startled at the same time. Mr. Ling, are you there? A soft, sweet voice was heard from outside, yet it was this voice that caused Yun Shuang to shiver uncontrollably. Her face had paled completely from terror. Lady Yen, the Lu sisters mouthed. Ling Han nodded. Kill her. Instantly, Lu Ru'er was boiling with killing intent. Chapter 201. Chapter 201 Probe. Kill your sister. Ling Han snorted. You're rebuking me? Lu Ru'er felt extremely wronged and immediately pouted. The person outside is in spiritual ocean tier. Ling Han exclaimed. Lu Ru'er was instantly silenced. It was precisely a spiritual ocean tier elite, Suku Xan, that she and her sister had lost to. If they had been able to kill a powerful martial artist like that, then they would have had no need to hide here to recover from their injuries. Then what do we do? Yun Shuang turned towards Ling Han. Having not completely shrugged off Lady Yan's authority, she was completely at a loss what to do. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, All of you go and hide inside the inner room. The three girls quickly rushed into the inner room, whereas Ling Han walked towards the main door and opened it. At the doorway, Lady Yan was standing in a beautiful pose, exuding a mature, exquisite grace. It was definitely not something that a wet-behind-the-ears young girl could compare to. She smiled softly and asked, What were you busy with, Mr. Ling? I was waiting for quite a while outside here. She was suspicious. Ling Han was naturally calm and collected. This woman held a deep, powerful love for her son. There was no doubt about that. However, he had never thought that she would have schemes so terrifyingly profound. She had already included Yun Shuang in her plans quite a few years ago. If it was not for the fact that Yun Shuang had so coincidentally overheard the conversation between her and Yen Tianzhao, then perhaps Yun Shuang would still feel overwhelmingly grateful to her, even until the moment of her death. But when he thought about it, how could Lady Yen be a simple character if she was able to make the business of cherishing Flower Pavilion into such a booming establishment? Nothing much. I was just playing around with Hunyao. Ling Han smiled and said, Does Lady Yen have some business with me? So I can't just come by for a chat if I don't have any business with you? Lady Yen smiled sweetly, her charm on full blast. However, this only gave Ling Han goosebumps. You're already a middle-aged woman in your 40s, and no matter how enchanting and charming you are, you still would not try and make a move on a young man like me, right? He frowned and said, It is not proper for a single man and woman to be together alone. Mr. Ling is really good at making jokes. You and Tianzhao are brothers and members of a younger generation than I. How does your theory about a single man and woman make sense then? Lady Yan said calmly. Then she giggled, and with a light tremble of her body, she said, Mr. Ling, could it be that you are hiding a beauty in your residence, and fear that I would discover her? She forced herself in, and Ling Han had no way to stop her. A spiritual ocean tier martial artist was far stronger than he. Hunyao instantly glared at her, and naturally thought Lady Yen to be an enemy. Ling Han picked Hunyao up so that the little girl would not be injured by Lady Yen if she actually dared to attack the latter. He followed at Lady Yan's heels and said, I do indeed have a young girl hidden here. Oh, who is it? Lady Yen asked casually. How could it be anyone but this little girl here? Ling Han laughed. He knew that Lady Yen was already suspicious, which was why she had forced her way in. It was obvious that Yun Shuang was of critical importance to Lady Yen, so much that she could even turn hostile against him for her. This concerned Yen Tianzhao's future prospects. One should never underestimate the maniacal lengths a mother could go to. She could do unimaginable things for the sake of her child. Lady Yen slightly started and instantly dissolved into a bout of delicate laughter. She did not mind showing off the waves of her body in front of Ling Han, causing Ling Han to feel disgusted. This body was a bit too old for his tastes. He had zero interest in seeing anything at all. Mr. Ling, has Shuang come here previously? She suddenly stopped, turned and asked him. Naturally. Ling Han nodded. Lady Yan invited me over for a banquet a few days ago. Didn't you just send Miss Shuang over with the invitation? Shuang did not come here today? Lady Yan asked, her tone laced with meaning. Ling Han knew that this was the point where they would be laying all their cards out on the table. If he answered no, and Lady Yan managed to find Yun Shuang here, then the relationship between them would naturally be completely shattered. No, Ling Han denied, without sparing even a moment of thought. Though he had always had a heart to sympathize with the weaker party, Ling Han thought that the kind of person who could manipulate the adopted daughter that she herself had taken in such a way was disgraceful. Mr. Ling would not mind if I take a look for myself, right? Lady Yan asked. If I say I mind, would Lady Yan listen to me? Ling Han countered, sighing deeply in his heart. If Guang Yuan had come over today, it would have been good. Lady Yan merely giggled delicately and began to tour around his courtyard, very quickly arriving at the room that the Lu sisters were staying in. She gave a light push, and when she realized that the doors were locked, a cold smirk curled up the corners of her lips. She suddenly exerted power through her palm and paw. The latch that kept the doors locked was shattered from the force. A creak resounded, and the doors opened slightly. Lady Yin gave a light push, and the two doors instantly opened wide. Yeah. A girl had been in the process of putting on her clothes, and when she saw the visitor, she hurriedly used her clothing to cover her breasts and asked with alarm, "Who are you?" Lady Yan's eyes swept over her. This was a young girl, and an extremely beautiful one at that, but she looked very different from Yun Shuang. Moreover, she was too familiar with Yun Shuang. Even if the latter had disguised herself, there was no way her eyes would be fooled. This girl was obviously not her. Hi, I'd like to request Lady Yan to keep my secret. Ling Han deliberately sighed. Please do not tell Yu Tong. A flash of suspicion passed over Lady Yan's face. Could it be that this girl was Ling Han's little girlfriend, and that was why he had tried repeatedly to stop her from entering? It was as simple as that. However, why did this girl look a little familiar to her? As she thought, she slowly nodded and said with a smile, Men are indeed all greedy and lecherous. Yu Tong is the princess of the Lu clan. Treat her well. Please do not miss out on such a wonderful relationship. Ling Han merely grinned awkwardly. I shall not disturb the two of you then. I still have some matters to attend to, so I shall beg my leave here. If Mr. Ling is free, please do come frequently to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion to play. Tiana misses you and Yu Tong very much. Lady Yan turned around and left. I shall escort you. Ling Han turned around and winked at Lu Feng, who was inside the room, then escorted Lady Yan out. When they arrived at the doors, Lady Yan abruptly turned around and asked, Mr. Ling, what is the name of that girl just now? I seem to have seen her somewhere before. How could that be? She is just a silly girl who has never seen the world, Ling Han said with a smile. Lady Yan nodded, turned and left. Ling Han closed the door and hurried to the room. At this moment, Lu Ru and Yun Shuang had also crawled out from underneath the bed. They had been holding their breath and hanging from the bed frame all along just now, so at this moment they were panting for breath. Who? Thank goodness the old witch was fooled and left, Lu Ru said, patting her chest in relief. Ling Han shook his head and said, Maybe not. Hasn't she already left? Lu Ru asked in incomprehension. She has, but she has not let go of all her suspicions, Ling Han said. If it was not for the fact that she did not want to completely turn hostile against me, she would have searched through the whole courtyard just now. However, this will only delay her for a while. He paused and said to Lu Feng, However, your identity has been exposed. I believe that she will quickly recall that you are a wanted criminal. That's impossible. Lu Ru shook her head, then said proudly, I deliberately let my sister step out just now. No one has seen her real face before. Are you an idiot? Ling Han said bluntly and pointed at the mirror. Just take a look at how similar the two of you look like. There would also be some discrepancies with the portrait of the wanted criminal, so the two of you can completely be taken to be the same person. She must have gone to inform the Imperial Guards by now, and before long the Imperial Guards would arrive to investigate. By that time, the three of you would be found, and her goal would naturally be achieved. Chapter 202. Chapter 202. Making a choice on the path of cultivation. Then what do we do now? A hint of worry appeared on the faces of the three girls. Of course, flee. Ling Han waved them off. Immediately, right now. All of you disguise yourselves and leave the Imperial City. How did you know that we know how to disguise ourselves? Lu Ru'er was once again stunned. Ling Han sighed and looked at her scornfully. Don't forget, I have seen how your sister looks like after she has disguised herself. Oh, right. Lu Ru'er clapped her hands, then looked a bit dejected. She was really so stupid, always being mocked by this guy. Make a move. You all don't have much time left, Ling Han urged. The three girls quickly began disguising themselves. The Lu sisters were professionals in this area. They disguised themselves first before helping Yun Shuang with her disguise. Instantly, they became three young men. What astonished Ling Han was the fact that somehow they managed to flatten their breasts and there was a protruding Adam's apple on their necks. They put on Ling Han's clothing and took with them some cash. Their original clothing, such as their skirts, for example, was burnt to ashes in the courtyard. Young Master Han, thank you. In the future, if I get the chance, Shuang will do everything to repay your great kindness. Yun Shuang thanked him. Ling Han shrugged and said, If you have not been sold off by the sisters, then we'll talk about it. Pay, we're not human traffickers. Lu Ru'er rolled her eyes. She thought that Ling Han was a really detestable character, always bickering with her. Mr. Ling, we shall meet again. Lu Feng curtsied. However, because she currently appeared to be a young man, this movement was extremely weird. Go on. Ling Han waved them off. The three girls left, and soon there was no sign left of them. Haha, it's finally quiet around here. Ling Han laughed. Actually, this was his real purpose. He had finally chased off two freeloaders, so he was very pleased. Hunyeo was also clapping her hands in delight, though she did not know what Ling Han was so happy about. However, Ling Han had not guessed wrongly. After over an hour, a troop of Imperial Guards arrived. Though their tone was polite, and they even apologized for disturbing him, they still insisted to search through Ling Han's courtyard. Naturally, nothing was discovered. They apologetically begged their leave. They had arrived in a rush and also left in a rush. Ling Han sighed. Looks like he and Lady Yen were firmly on opposing sides by no, it was not that they had not found the person she was looking for, but that they had not found anyone at all. Since one person could disappear, then, naturally, two or even three could disappear as well. For the sake of her son, Lady Yen immersed herself in scheming, and could even involve the adopted daughter she had cared for so many years in her plans. What more him? Forget it. I'll just offend her, then. Anyways, I already have many enemies, so it would be of no difference if I have another one. Ling Han lazily stretched. He should go and prepare their meals. Hunyeo was already hanging from his neck and endlessly shouting, Meat, meat, meat! 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and Guang Yuan had finally arrived. However, he did not choose to stay in Ling Han's courtyard. Instead, he found another courtyard near to Ling Han's own. Anyways, there were a lot of empty, unoccupied courtyards in this area. With a bodyguard in spiritual ocean tier, Ling Han was naturally much more relaxed. This was real battle prowess. As long as no one in spiritual pedestal tier appeared, there were not many who could defeat Guang Yuan. Moreover, with a bit of guidance from Ling Han, It would be enough for Guang Yuan to become invincible against anyone in spiritual ocean tier. However, Ling Han was not in the mood for this right now. His cultivation rate was too rapid. Now he had reached the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier. He would have to either break through to gushing spring tier, or he could only stay at this cultivation level, and there would be no further increase to his battle prowess. It was not that he had no way to break through to gushing spring tier. Instead, it was because he was currently faced with a choice he could still attempt to challenge and break through to the 10th layer of element gathering tier. This was a cultivation level that only existed in legends and theories. At least, as far as Ling Han knew, no one had reached this cultivation level before. Break through the limitation of 9 and capture the one of the world reaching perfection. But was it really possible? In the records of that predecessor, that was only a guess, but it had never been accomplished before. Ling Han considered seriously the probability of success. In his last life, he had already been in heaven tier, so naturally he needed not think of this problem as he had long passed this level. However, the current him not only had the comprehension remaining from his last life, he also had the necessary conditions that qualified him to make this attempt, and this was what caused him to hesitate. How high was this possibility? Ling Han tried to deduce the possible results, but still did not come to a conclusion. It could only be claimed that, theoretically, it was indeed possible. However, without being proven in reality, everything was mere empty words. A madness gradually brimmed in his eyes, and he decided to take the gamble. In this life, he was cultivating the indestructible Heaven Scroll. This was an amazing technique, with a grade so high that it could not be estimated. Then, with such a cultivation technique in his hands, should he not ensure that his foundations would be incomparably sturdy and firm? Element Gathering Tier was the second cultivation tier in martial arts. One could say that this was merely the beginning, but it was an extremely important step, as the subsequent 7 tiers would all be derived from this one tier. He decided to take this risk. He began his seclusion to challenge this 10th layer of element gathering tier that perhaps no one had ever managed to reach before. In his dantian, there were 9 big origin nuclei and 45 smaller origin nuclei that took the shape of a 9-palace array. It was a very stable and subtle arrangement. If he decided to insert another origin nucleus, where should he put it? Ling Han felt a headache coming on. Though he had decided to take the risk and make the attempt, he truly had no idea where to start. How could innovation be anything easy? He had considered many possibilities, but he rejected them all. That was because if he could consider them, then it was natural that his predecessors would have thought of them as well. Even if they themselves had missed out on the chance, how could they not allow their juniors to make the attempt? To successfully complete this step would naturally need him to deviate from the normal path, or even go to extreme lengths or a dead end. Only with that would it be possible for him to be forced into such desperate straits that he had no other way but succeed. Ling Han hesitated once again. If he merely had to follow in the steps of his predecessors, then as long as his foundations were firm, with his immortal grade spirit base and the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he would definitely advance faster and go further than he had in his last life. So it seemed like there was no need for him to take such a risk. However, his heart and spirit became even more determined. He wanted to become the strongest in this life. His heart and spirit returned to a calm state, and he began to consider a considerable number of strategies on how to proceed with his gamble. There was a large number of possible options that were immediately eliminated by him when he thought of them, and finally there were only 2 possible methods he could attempt left. The first was to allow the 9 big origin nuclei to repel each other and create a special space where he would form his 10th origin nucleus. The second was to merge all 9 big origin nuclei into one gigantic origin nucleus. This could also be considered as one and conform to the Tao of the world, becoming the evasive one. In comparison, the second strategy was practically crazy. Thus, Ling Han decided to first attempt the former. He worked hard on allowing the 9 big origin nuclei to repel each other and create a special space in between them. This step was possible, but the problem was that the 9 big origin nuclei were the source of his energy and power. Now that they were repelling each other, all his energy and power was spent here. So how could he have the extra energy to form the 10th origin nucleus? Ling Han tried a number of ways, but still there was no way to solve this problem. All of a sudden, 10 days had passed, and he was still back where he had started. Was this method not possible? Ling Han sighed. He had already wasted precious 10 days, so he did not want to and could not continue to delay the matter any longer. He still wanted to break through to gushing spring tear and understand the secrets of the Black Tower. Then he'd give the second strategy a try. Chapter 203. Chapter 203, Merging 9 Nuclei. The second strategy he'd come up with was to destroy and reform. He had to first destroy all 9 big origin nuclei and form a new gigantic origin nuclei that would become the evasive one. This conformed to the Tao of the world and was not something he had come up with in the heat of the moment. But he could foresee that putting this into practice would be much more difficult than whatever he could think up of. The 9 big origin nuclei were the source of his power. If he actually shattered them all in one go, then the power created from their simultaneous destruction would be enough to kill him 1,000 times or 10,000 times, so there was no need for him to even think about forming the evasive one at that point. The reason why Ling Han dared to do this was because there was still Big Boss Black Tower in his Dantian. This big boss shattered his physical body in his last life just to have him cultivate the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and then had him seize a new body to be reborn. How great a power was that, and how much of a concern one was that? Now he intended to self-destruct his origin nuclei. So Big Boss Black, are you going to interfere or not? You definitely have to interfere, right? Then everything's settled. Ling Han was a bit shameless, but there was no other way for it. This was the first attempt to break through to the 10th layer of element gathering tier in history, and he did not even know what was the right thing to do to achieve his aim. Thus, he could only depend on the Black Tower. Otherwise, there would only be a millionth of a chance that he would succeed in this attempt. So how could he dare to take the risk? Come on then. He controlled the origin nuclei in his Dantian and began the process of destruction. It was actually very easy to do this because all the big nuclei were comprised of 5 smaller origin nuclei that had different elemental alignments, and these smaller origin nuclei achieved a balance between them in a wonderful way. He only needed to break this balance, and the 5 elements would go out of control, and naturally the origin nuclei would self-destruct. Not one by one, but all in one go. Destruction was always easier than construction. Within only an instant, all the origin nuclei began to tremble. The 5 elements both augmented and restrained each other. They began to totter, as if they were the foundations of a tall skyscraper that had suffered heavy damage, and were on the verge of destruction. Hong, hong, hong. The 5 origin nuclei were destroyed, one by one. However, their explosion did not spread outwards. Instead, their explosion was concentrated inwards, as if they formed individual black holes. From an extremely big structure, they shrank into extremely small balls. Ling Han's spirit and heart trembled, already feeling the appearance of external power. Black Tower. His consciousness swept over his Dantian and saw the usually calm and ordinary Black Tower was currently emanating a pale light. There was golden writing flickering on the body of the Black Tower, but Ling Han did not even recognize half of a character of this writing, just like when he first encountered the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which required 10,000 years simply to comprehend it. No. 10,000 years was only enough to comprehend the first layer of cultivation technique. One wave of power after another swept out from the Black Tower and acted towards those 45 origin nuclei of his. And it was precisely this power that allowed the explosive power to be concentrated inwards instead of exploding outwards dramatically. Otherwise, his dantian would be completely destroyed in the aftermath. A smile appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. Indeed, he had made the right gamble. The Black Tower made its move. He had tried out a lot of things previously, but there was still no reaction from the Black Tower. That was because those attempts would not threaten Ling Han's life or cultivation. So Big Boss Black naturally was too lazy to do anything. But if Ling Han induced the self-destruction of his origin nuclei, then wouldn't that mean the 10,000 years of preparation Big Boss Black had spent would be completely wasted? He hurriedly forced down the distracting thoughts in his head and began to merge the corresponding origin nuclei together. Earth with earth, fire with fire, and so on. Finally, the 45 origin nuclei were reformed into 5 big origin nuclei of different alignments. This still seemed very small, because each origin nuclei was formed from 9 points and was far from 1/1,000,000th of his most flourishing period, but the power concealed within them was incomparably terrifying. Ling Han's thoughts took a different turn, and he suddenly came up with a strange idea. Could he actually merge these origin nuclei of different elemental alignment into one, to become one origin nuclei and the only one existing in his dantian? That would conform to the idea of the evasive one. Again, he began to merge the 5 freshly reborn origin nuclei. But the difficulty level of doing that was extremely high. That was because each origin nuclei was formed from 9 smaller origin nuclei, and it was filled with frightening power in the first place. Moreover, the 5 elements were independent of each other. First of all, water and fire was on completely opposing sides, so how could he merge them together? Ling Han stopped and began to ponder. Each element in this world was completely independent of each other. They would of course repel one another if one attempted to merge them together. However, at the same time, the 5 elements augmented and restrained one another, so it was not entirely impossible for them to be merged together. As the saying goes, Tao gave rise to 1, 1 gave rise to 2, 2 gave rise to 3, and 3 gave rise to all things. Everything could return to 1, the source of Tao. However, the world would not allow mere mortals to get hold of the source of Tao, which was how the saying of the evasive one came about. He dared to destroy the 9 origin nuclei and merge them together as one again, and this conformed to the theory of the evasive one. However, these 5 origin nuclei were not the real one, and not the real Tao either. This was based on his understanding of the Tao of martial arts from his last life as a heaven-tier elite. Otherwise, who would dare attempt such a feat? The 5 elements augmented each other and evolved into all things. Then, if he wanted to return them back to one, he would have to retrace the steps and make use of the fact that the 5 elements also restrained one another. Ling Han's eyes slowly lit up. He knew what he had to do. He had to let the 5 elemental origin nuclei restrain one another, swallow one another, and finally there would only be one remaining, which would be the one that had been merged from all the 5 elemental origin nuclei. This was again easily said, but when he put it into practice, he needed to ensure that the 5 elemental origin nuclei were in a perfect balance when they swallowed one another. Otherwise, as long as there was the slightest mistake, all his previous efforts would have been for nothing, and he would have no way to return to the only evasive one. In short, he could only succeed, but failure was not allowed. It was very challenging, but he liked it. The 5 elements restrained each other. Gold restrained wood, wood restrained earth, earth restrained water, water restrained fire, and fire restrained gold, all at once. The 5 elements mixed chaos lotus fluttered, absorbing spiritual chi, which passed through his veins and gathered in his dantian, delivering new energy. Ling Han stimulated the 5 elemental origin nuclei and took the last step. The gold origin nucleus began to swallow the wood origin nucleus, and the wood origin nucleus began to swallow the earth origin nucleus, and finally the fire origin nucleus swallowed the gold origin nucleus, forming an unbreakable chain. Ling Han's consciousness clearly saw the 5 origin nuclei were all shrinking and merging slowly together to finally form a new origin nucleus. Gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. All the 5 elements were present, yet they were united. He succeeded. Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes and felt that his whole body was sore. He did not even have the energy to stand, as if his body had weakened to extreme levels. However, on the other hand, his spirit was at its highest level in history, and this was a very weird comparison. He opened the door and gave a light call. When the words came out of his mouth, he realized that his voice had become low and rough, so much that he could barely recognize his own voice. Ling Han. Xiao, who Niu's ears were too sharp, and she had raced in from outside. With a pound, she crashed into Ling Han's arms. This collision was too powerful, no weaker than an explosion, and Ling Han instantly fell to the ground from the force. Hu Niu did not care and rubbed her small face on him, then said, Ling Han mean. Not playing with Niu. Ling Han, if you continued seclusion for a few more days, Hu Niu would probably starve to death. Another person walked in, and it was Lu Yutong. She shook her head and said, You entered seclusion for a whole month, almost causing her to die of worry. A month. Ling Han was stunned. As he remembered it, only 10 days had passed. Could it be that his merging of the 5 elemental origin nuclei at the end had taken a whole 20 days? No wonder he was so weak. After all, he hadn't eaten and drunk for so many days. Bring me some fruits. I need to replenish my energy or I really will die, he said. You're weird, brat. Guang Yuang heard the commotion and walked in as well. When he looked at Ling Han, it was as if he was looking at a monster. Chapter 204. Chapter 204. The 3 Styles of Black Origin. Guang Yuan said, If a normal martial artist in element gathering tier went into seclusion for a whole month, he would have definitely died. But you brat can actually still manage to open your mouth and talk. This is really strange. He directed a burning look at Ling Han, as if he wanted nothing more to dissect Ling Han to launch a full investigation. In truth, Ling Han had still had eaten in the first 10 days, but he did not have any food in the 20 days after that. Not even he himself had noticed the passage of time. He had merely merged the 5 elemental origin nuclei, and when he came out of seclusion after succeeding, he realized that 20 days had passed. At that time, he was in a very intriguing state, as spiritual qi was his food and helped to maintain his vitality. After a martial artist stepped into flower blossoming tier, he only needed to absorb spiritual qi to survive, as there would be a complete change to his level of being after breaking through to flower blossoming tier, and he would not have to depend on food. Previously, he merged together the 5 element origin nuclei to capture that evasive one, and united with the Tao of this world, which was equivalent to having temporarily raised the level of his being to this level, and so he had entered into this state ahead of time. However, now that he was out of that state, he immediately felt hungry and weak. Lu Yutong fetched some fruits, and Ling Han immediately began to eat. He had to first fill his stomach before eating any meat, otherwise his body would not be able to take it. Guang Yuan stared at Ling Han. He kept feeling that something was off. He suddenly clapped his hands, then exclaimed, That's right, why has your cultivation fallen back to the first layer of element gathering tier? Previously, this brat was obviously in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. When a martial artist went into seclusion, that was for the purpose of breaking through to a higher cultivation level. However, even if the attempt failed, the cultivation level should not regress even a bit. What more all the way from the 9th layer to the 1st? This was practically unheard of. In the whole world of martial arts, what other person could do that? Lu Yutong became worried. She looked at Ling Han closely, and indeed sensed from the aura emanating from Ling Han's dantian that there was only one origin nucleus there. She instantly paled, but when she thought about the fact that Ling Han would definitely feel worse than her, She hurriedly comforted him. It's all right. With your cultivation rate, it would only take 2 to 3 months for you to return to the 9th layer. Ling Han smiled slightly. He naturally knew his own situation. Though there was indeed only one origin nucleus in his dantian, he was a few times stronger than when he was in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. However, he did not explain as this issue involved too much. Moreover, it was likely no one would believe him even if he did. That's not right. Guang Yuan was flustered as his eyes stared at Ling Han's dantian in concentration, and he said, "You are obviously only in the 1st layer of element gathering tier. But why is that I get such a powerful feeling from you, as if I am facing someone in the 1st layer of gushing spring tier?" The 1st layer of element gathering tier could compare to the 1st layer of gushing spring tier? If he actually said this in public, he would definitely be smacked, as others would think that he was muddled from too much drinking and would attempt to sober him. However, Ling Han nodded internally. Spiritual ocean tier was spiritual ocean tier after all. His eyes were indeed much sharper. Ha ha ha, how could that be? My eyes must have got blurred. Guang Yuan laughed loudly as he smacked his own head. Pooh! Ling Han almost choked. He had just praised Guang Yuan for having sharp eyes when this guy immediately smacked his praise back into his face. Right. There's a silly brat that came over to look for you a few days ago. He said something about having accomplished the promise of a month. He has to go do something. Then he will return to listen to your commands, Guang Yuan said. Oh, that should be Zhu Wujiu. He has broken through to gushing spring tier. He said he was going to go do something. Then he must have definitely gone to challenge Ningongji to a battle. He was indeed a loyal man. Ling Han nodded internally. If it was not for the fact that Zhu Wujiu had this kind of personality, the most he would have done was pass on the cultivation technique of the Silver Moon Race to him, and not allow him to stay by his side. How could it be possible that anyone random could have the chance to stay by his side and be commanded by him? After eating some more fruit, Ling Han managed to regain some energy. After a while, he began to eat a full meal. Hunyao did not mind accompanying him in eating. As a result, she ate 10 times more than what he had eaten, and this was merely what the little girl did casually to accompany him for the meal. Ling Han excused himself, saying he intended to go to cultivate. He went alone into the small forest outside. He wanted to do a full evaluation of his current power. He concentrated his origin power in his fist, and when he had reached the limit, he suddenly punched out. The power of his punch burst out, and it actually became a solid fist that was the size of a human fist that flew forwards. Pung, pung, pung. In front of him, over 10 big trees were toppled by the attack, creating a plume of dust as they crashed onto the ground. Ling Han drew back his fist, a hint of satisfaction on his face. The strength of this punch was indeed comparable to the attack of a martial artist in the early period of the 1st layer of gushing spring tier, as if the 10th layer of element gathering tier was the 1st layer of gushing spring tier. Breaking through from the element gathering tier to the gushing spring tier is a solid leap in strength. There would at least be a 10-fold increase in strength. Then, by the time that I truly break through to gushing spring tier, my strength should be able to compare to the 6th or 7th layer. What more battle prowess? The higher the cultivation level, the more difficult it is to challenge an opponent in a higher cultivation level. However, after merging the origin nuclei, my ability to challenge someone stronger than me has instead increased. When I was in the 1st layer of element gathering tier, I only had about 5 to 6 stars of battle prowess. With the support of such great strength, then wouldn't I be able to begin cultivating a black-grade martial arts technique? Ling Han was moved. If he was able to use black-grade martial arts techniques at this point, then this would be a terrifying increase to his battle prowess. Let's give it a try. He flipped through the contents of his memories, looking for a cultivation technique that was suited to him. However, because he was aligned to all 5 elements, aside from lightning element martial arts techniques, He could actually use any kind of martial arts techniques. Thus, there was a large variety of choices available to him. Then, I'll use this one. 3 styles of black origin. This is a sword technique that guy, the Sword Emperor, has used before. According to rumors, it was precisely when he pondered this sword technique that he came to form Sword Ray. When he came begging me for alchemical pills, I asked for this sword technique in exchange. It was only something I did on impulse at the time, but I never thought that I would truly make good use of it. He sat down in a cross-legged position and began to analyze this sword technique in his head. This was a black-grade high-level martial arts technique. However, there were also superior and inferior martial arts techniques, even if they were all in black-grade high level. Some were so powerful they were actually close to Earth grade. If there was a rank from 1 to 10 points to grade the martial arts techniques, then the majority of black-grade high-level martial techniques would be ranked below 5 points, while occasionally there would be a few that were worth 6 or 7 points. However, the black origin sword technique was worth 10 points. This was merely a small step away from Earth-grade martial arts techniques. It could be claimed as the strongest technique for anyone who had yet to reach spiritual pedestal tier. However, the words were complicated and very difficult to understand. Thankfully, though Ling Han was only in element gathering tier, with regards to comprehension of martial arts, he was indeed in heaven tier. Perhaps it would still be a bit difficult for him to comprehend heaven-grade martial arts techniques, but Earth-grade martial arts techniques were naturally a piece of cake to him. What more when this technique was merely close to Earth grade. First style, mysterious, 3000. Ling Han brandished his sword. His movement was obviously very rough and did not have much force behind it. In fact, it was a bit staggering from side to side. If anyone had seen this, they would likely have fallen down in laughter. The Sword Emperor was indeed a maniac. To actually learn this sword technique when he was only in element gathering tier, he cursed internally. Even with his comprehension abilities of heaven tier, it was still a bit straining for him to cultivate this sword technique, which showed how much of a monster the Sword Emperor was. But he was also overthinking it, though. Could the Sword Emperor have mastered this sword technique in a mere day? Ling Han endlessly brandished his sword, and his sword technique became smoother and smoother. After all, this was still an ultimate elite of heaven tier who was practicing the sword technique. It would be stranger if this was not the result. Xiao, xiao, xiao! He waved his sword, and a burst of origin power shot out, combining with the spiritual chi of the surroundings, and actually transformed into a few dozen sharp swords that flew forwards in an attack. Pum! The ground whined and shook, and the trees in front of him collapsed in patches. Ling Han was dumbstruck. What a terrifying sword technique! Chapter 205. Chapter 205. Strong enough to defy the natural order. Awesome. Really awesome. Ling Han kept nodding. According to what's depicted on the sword technique, one could be considered as having reached the state of major accomplishment when one can produce a 3,000 blade rain with one wave. One wave from me, and I managed to produce a few dozen blades in my attack, which means I have reached around 1% of that level. Still, this power, every blade in the blade rain would be equivalent to a full force attack for me. Even if it was me standing against such an attack, I would only be able to block this attack by transforming the blood-sucking origin gold into a shield. Otherwise, there would be no way to disperse this attack. Merely with this one style, as long as I too have broken through to Gushing Spring tier, then I would be able to defeat Feng Yan in an instant. However, that guy should still have hidden cards up his sleeve, so it would not be easy to kill him. Additionally, this style of the sword technique expends too much origin power. One wave of the sword is equivalent to producing a few dozen full-force attacks. If it was not for the fact that the space in my dantian had expanded by more or less 100-fold, I would not be able to bear such an expense of origin power. The Sword Emperor is indeed a maniac. This guy must also have swallowed a spatial pill when he was young. Otherwise, even if he was in Gushing Spring tier, he would not be able to keep up such heavy use of his origin power either. And now that I think about it, in my last life, aside from the Sword Emperor, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden also had control over endless ye fires, so she probably must have fused with a strange fire, perhaps even more than one. The Setting Sun Saber Emperor obtained a treasured saber forged from blood-sucking origin gold, and was similarly terrifying in power. And there's also Ma Weiyang, Ji Shuexian, and Nalon Tuesday. These three were not simple characters either. They also seemed to have their own secret weapons, and I was the only one with the weakest battle prowess amongst all of them. When I recall it now, they must have come from extremely powerful backgrounds, which was what allowed them to reach Heaven tier at such a young age. I was the only one who depended on the effects of the alchemical pills I concocted, and managed to reach Heaven tier even though I began later than them, and soon surpassed them by a wide margin. This land seems to be a much deeper pond than what I had thought at first. Never mind. 10,000 years has already passed, and all those guys should have become dust by now, so there's no point thinking about it any longer. Ling Han recovered his origin power and began to cultivate the second style of Black Origin, Sword Technique 10,000 techniques, return to 1. This was a powerful move, and required a certain time period to gather enough power for it. It was as if the user collected the power used in 10,000 attacks and combined them to form a single strike. After Ling Han obtained the Black Origin Sword Technique in his last life, he merely looked it over roughly because he did not have any intention to cultivate this sword technique at all, and thus naturally did not take it to heart. However, now that he had begun practicing it, he could not help but pale. Was this really a black grade martial arts technique? One style produced 3,000 full force attacks all at once, while another combined the force behind 10,000 attacks into a single strike. The force in these two styles was definitely crazily powerful. Putting aside Earth grade, not even Heaven grade martial arts techniques would be this awesome. How could this be? If it was an Earth grade or Heaven grade, then how could he manage to cultivate it at this point in time? Martial artists in body refining and element gathering tier could only cultivate yellow grade martial arts techniques, whereas martial artists in Gushing Spring and Spiritual Ocean tiers could advance one step further and cultivate black grade martial arts techniques. Spiritual Pedestal tier would mean another step further, being able to cultivate Earth grade martial arts techniques. And only when one cast off his mortal body and broke through to Flower Blossoming tier would one meet the requirements to peep into Heaven grade martial arts techniques. Since that was the case, then it should not be possible for him to cultivate Earth grade martial arts techniques now. What more Heaven grade? However, he had been in Heaven tier in his last life, so he clearly knew the power of Earth grade and Heaven grade martial arts techniques. Thus, he was naturally able to judge that the power of the three styles of Black Origin definitely did not place it in the Black grade category. When Ling Han thought back, it was no wonder the Sword Emperor had such an ugly expression, as if his parents had died when he handed over this technique. He had at first thought that the Sword Emperor would not care about a Black grade sword technique when he was already that powerful. He had never imagined these three styles of sword technique would be so terrifying. Then what about the third style? Ling Han did not continue to cultivate 10,000 techniques, return to 1. Instead, he worked hard to analyze the third style. Then he experienced a great shock. The third style was called Breaking Limits, and the amount of origin power required for this move could practically fill an ocean. According to his calculations, even when he had broken through to Spiritual Ocean tier, he would still need at least a few hours to gather enough power to be able to perform this last style. This was definitely not used to battle your enemies. A scene appeared in Ling Han's mind. A magnificently powerful elite warrior was faced against a gigantic protective array. He raised his sword and, after a very long time, brandished it in a strike. A flash of light from the blade washed over, and the giant array was destroyed. That's right. Breaking limits was used to slice open protective arrays. In front of such a powerful technique, even an ancient giant array could possibly be destroyed, and it would directly kill off the living beings hidden behind this protective array. This style of sword technique could no longer be judged according to grade. Ling Han supported his chin with his hands, and a pensive expression appeared on his face. In his last life, he had never battled with the other 6 heaven-tier elites, because he knew that his cultivation level had merely advanced through swallowing alchemical pills. His battle prowess was also the weakest and least solid of all of them, so he would naturally not bother seeking his own humiliation. However, the other 6 would frequently battle each other, all competing for the position of the strongest. Even though Na Lan Tu, Ji Shuxian, and Ma Weiyang were always ranked below the top 3, they were still able to exchange blows with the Sword Emperor and not die, or even get serious injuries out of it. Now that he thought about it, they were practically terrifying people. What kind of monsters were those 6? Ling Han could not help but want to go mad. In his last life, after he had reached Heaven Tier, he had spent the majority of his time on searching for a way to break through to shattering Void Tier. Otherwise, if he had gone to investigate the secrets of those 6, he would not be at a loss like this now. From the broken shards of memory of the blood-sucking origin gold, a terrifyingly prosperous period of martial arts could be seen. And a few dozen years or a few hundred years after my death, there once again appeared heaven-tier elites by the hundred on this land. This means that I had yet to really grasp all knowledge and understanding of this world. Moreover, there is still such a divine object like the Black Tower, and the little girl's spirit base is also a very shocking existence. Interesting. Ling Han stood up and once again began to cultivate 10,000 techniques, return to one. This was a powerful technique that could be used to battle one's enemies. If he was actually given enough time to accumulate the power necessary for this style, then no matter how many trump cards Feng Yan had hidden up his sleeve, he still had the confidence he would be able to kill the latter with a wave of his sword. This consumed too much origin power. Only after a while, Ling Han again sat down and had to swallow a few pills and absorb spiritual qi to replenish his energy. Sword Emperor. Sword Emperor, though you're long dead, but if your sect still existed, I would be interested to take a look around there. What kind of place could the Heaven's Sword sect be, to actually possess such a terrifying martial arts technique? He practiced for a while, then stopped to rest, then began practicing again, and very soon the day passed. Ling Han was still mostly concentrating his efforts on advancing to a higher cultivation level now. Only when he broke through to gushing spring tier would he be able to understand the secrets of the Black Tower. Thankfully, this would only require about half a month's time. That's right, though he was only left with one gigantic origin nucleus. The time needed to strengthen this origin nucleus as far as it could go was threefold the time he had spent previously. On the next day, Liu Tong once again gracefully arrived. Let me tell you a piece of good news. Feng Yan has left the academy. It seems he's gone to ask for some kind of spiritual medicine that will allow Feng Luo's arms to be as good as new, she said. Ling Han was dumbfounded. Could this Feng Luo really be born in the year of the cockroach, or something like that? In the past, he thrashed and smacked him so much that he had even lost his whole mouth of teeth. However, not long after, he would go back to acting all high and mighty. Now he had even chopped off his arms, and Feng Luo still had the chance to recover. But has his arms been reattached now? And they were reattached, but they're not very nimble. There is no way for him to exert any strength through his arms, and that's why Feng Yan has gone off to seek a spiritual medicine to help him recover, Liu Tong said. This was indeed a very dutiful elder brother. Pung, pung, pung. A knocking was heard from the doors, and Hunyao ran over to open them. Soon, she came back leading a person behind her. It was Zhu Wujiao. I broke through to gushing spring tear 7 days ago and fulfilled the promise I made with you. However, from the looks of things now, I am not able to become your follower. I can only repay you in my next life. Zhu Wujiu said. Why? Ling Han asked. I sought Nangong Ji out for a challenge and crippled his Dantian. Soon, the academy will have me captured. Even if I am not sentenced to death, my cultivation will still be crippled. Zhu Wujiu said calmly, no hint of fear or regret on his face at all. Chapter 206. Chapter 206, Arrest. Ling Han laughed and said, just a small thing like that. A small thing like that. Putting aside the issue of Nangong Ji's identity, the rules of the academy clearly stated that spars were acceptable, but crippling injuries and deadly attacks were strictly forbidden. Anyone who broke the rules would be harshly punished. Additionally, there was the issue of Nangong Ji's identity. He was the young master of a middle-class clan, and furthermore had an elder brother who was a true disciple. How could the Nangong clan simply let the matter go? Zhu Wujiu was a very solitary character. Anyways, he was all alone with no family. If they wanted his life, they were free to claim it. Either way, he had already crippled Nangong Ji. For a martial artist, crippling his cultivation was no better than killing him directly, especially in those bigger clans. The status of a crippled martial artist would fall dramatically in his own clan, and anyone was free to come over and give him another kick while he was down. That strong disparity in his treatment would be enough to cause anyone to commit suicide. Obviously, Zhu Wujiu had the ability to kill Nangong Ji, yet he had only crippled the latter's cultivation to allow Nangong Ji to experience that colossal disparity and give him a worse punishment. Just stay here for now, and I'll see who dares to come capture you, Ling Han said calmly. What a boastful tone. When the people sent from the discipline committee of the academy arrived, would you really dare to jump out? So what if you did dare to jump out? For a mere martial artist in element gathering tier, wasn't that merely overrating yourself and attempting to do the impossible? But when he thought about it, Ling Han was well-intentioned, so Zhu Wujiu nodded and said, Thank you, but I was the one who caused this trouble, so I will definitely not drag you into it. Ling Han merely smiled. If he continued to say anything more, it was likely Zhu Wujiu would think that he was bragging. He had no intention to be looked down upon by a descendant of the Silver Moon race. Brat, a lot of people are here. Guang Yuan arrived in a leap. He had heard the commotion and recalled the fact that he was now Ling Han's bodyguard, and so naturally came to inform him and stood on one side to watch. They're here to arrest me, Zhu Wujiu said calmly. He had already fulfilled his heart's desire, so he was absolutely unconcerned about whether he lived or died anymore. That's right. Here to capture you. A group of 10 walked in. The one in the lead was a young man who looked to be in his mid-20s, and there was arrogance and rage in his expression. The captain of Team 4 of the Discipline Committee, Nangong Xing. He was also Nangong Ji's elder brother, and in the third layer of gushing spring tear. He was of course furious. Zhu Wujiu actually dared to cripple his younger brother's Dantian. This was a challenge to the authority of the Nangong clan and also a harsh slap to his face, making him feel the urge to commit murder. Since you already know, are you not going to submit yourself to be arrested? Nangong Xing asked coldly. He threw a challenging look at Ling Han. He was naturally defiant. A mere minor character in element gathering tier was actually able to cause waves in the academy and become a famous person in Huyang Academy. Also, according to rumors, even the two extreme beauties, Lu Yutong and Li Xichan, were close to him. His eyes had turned red from feeling extreme jealousy. In his eyes, Ling Han had merely gotten about of asterisk good fortune, and had merely obtained the prestige he had now because of Feng Yan. Moreover, if it was not the fact that he was so extremely fortunate and was rescued by the headmaster of the alchemy department who had so coincidentally happened to pass by, this guy would have long been torn to pieces by Feng Yan. He looked at Ling Han, and a cold smile appeared on his lips as he said, "Ling Han, are you going to cover for this criminal?" "This has nothing to do with Ling Han." Zhu Wujiu stepped out. It was because of Ling Han's help that he had managed to surpass Nangong Ji's cultivation level and get his vengeance. It was already enough that he could not repay Ling Han's kindness. So how could he allow Ling Han to be dragged down by him into this matter? "You're sensible," Nangong Xing humphed. If Ling Han dared to show off at this time, he would not mind arresting one more person. "Aren't you very mighty? Then I'll arrest you and go one round in the academy, and let's see if you still have any face left to see anyone. Apprehend him and drag him back." Nangong Xing waved his hand. Immediately, two people walked towards Zhu Wujiu. One of them had a chain in his hands. This was forged from black blood iron. Once a person was chained by this chain, then even an elite of spiritual ocean tier would not be able to escape. "Hold on." Ling Han stepped out and stretched out a hand to block their advance. He said, "This is one of mine. You people want to capture him, but have you gotten my approval yet?" "Ha ha ha." Nangong Xing was delighted. Ling Han actually wanted to interfere, then that was great. He was just being troubled over having no excuse to do anything to Ling Han, and this brat actually delivered himself to be stamped on. "Ling Han, how dare you!" he shouted in rebuke. "This is a criminal that the Academy has commanded to be arrested." "Wrong." Ling Han held up a finger and waved it from left to right. "Whether it is a crime or not, he should still undergo a trial to be judged. Yet you keep saying criminal here and there. Does that mean you're above the Academy? From how I look at it, you're the one who is extremely bold." Nangong Xing could not help but be at a loss for words. Then he said in anger and embarrassment, "Ling Han, you are merely twisting the facts. I am commanded to make the arrest, and if you dare to interfere, I will apprehend you as well. If anyone dares to touch one of my people, I would not mind breaking his legs." Ling Han's eyes swept over the whole group, and he grinned. "If you're not scared, you all can give it a try, but don't say I didn't warn you." The expressions on the members of the discipline committee all changed. When they thought about how he had sliced off Feng Luo's arms, according to the Academy regulations, this was a crime in no way lighter than Zhu Wujiu crippling Nangong Ji's cultivation. But this guy was still completely safe and unharmed. Even Feng Yan, who was very influential at this time, seemed to be unable to do anything against him. So no one dared to think of his threats as mere empty words. When he saw the fearful expressions of his subordinates, Nangong Xing could not help but feel enraged and humiliated, and said, "This is the Huyang Academy. Who would dare to be above the Academy?" When they heard these words, quite a number of people rolled their eyes secretly. There were indeed none who dared in the past. But just some time ago, Feng Luo had already broken the rules and expelled Li Hao for no reason whatsoever. Then Ling Han, who had sliced off Feng Luo's arms, was not punished at all. When one now talked about the Academy rules, it was always with a tone of sarcasm. "Young Master Han, I don't want to involve you," Zhu Wujiu said as he turned back to face Ling Han. He would accept Ling Han's good intentions, but could not bear to have him dragged into this matter for his sake. "Nonsense. If you want to battle to death for my sake in future, there would be a lot of opportunities for you to do so. But now be quiet and stand behind me obediently." Ling Han waved him off and turned to look at Nangong Xing. "I do not welcome outsiders here. Would you like to leave on your own, or would you like me to toss you all out?" "Ling Han, don't be so conceited." Nangong Xing strode forwards, and his sword left its sheath. He stared at Ling Han for a moment, then said with a smirk, "You've gone mad from cultivation, haven't you? Your cultivation actually dropped to the first layer of element gathering tier? With such little ability, you still dare to be so insolent in front of me? Just you watch as I force you all into submission with a single move." Zhu Wujiu gritted his teeth and stepped in front of Ling Han. He also drew his sword and said, "Nan Gongxing, I can go with you. This matter has nothing to do with young Master Han. Don't force me to make a move." Nan Gongxing hesitated slightly. Zhu Wujiu was also in Gushing Spring Tier, though his ability was beneath his own. But if he really forced the former into desperate straits, then even if he managed to apprehend him successfully, he would have to pay a heavy price. He was only jealous of Ling Han, which was why he wanted to embarrass him. But if the price for such an act was that he would suffer heavy injuries, he was not as foolish as that. "All right." He nodded. "Little Jiu, when did it start that you were the one to make decisions around here? Just stand at one side." Ling Han clapped a hand onto Zhu Wujiu's shoulder and pulled him back. His characteristic of covering for his own people was fully activated. He waved Nan Gongxing off and said, "Get lost quickly. Don't say I'm bullying you. Find someone stronger." "Fuck." Nan Gongxing was so angry his whole face was twisted. Chapter 207. Chapter 207, Blind. He was merely in the first layer of element gathering, and actually dared to be so arrogant. Did he think that just because he had exchanged a few moves with Feng Yan, he was already in Gushing Spring Tier? Nan Gongxing did not believe that in the slightest. He only thought it was merely those who had witnessed the scene had exaggerated what they had seen, and the rumors had increasingly distorted the truth, which had led to such a preposterous idea. Element gathering tier managing to oppose Gushing Spring Tier? Pay. Nan Gongxing said icily, "Since that is the case, then don't blame me for being forceful. You are protecting a criminal that the Academy has issued a warrant for, so your crime is the same. I am the captain of Team 4 of the Discipline Committee, and am under the command to make the arrest. If anyone dares to stop me, I have the special privilege to kill all in my way." Lu Yutong stepped out. She thought that Ling Han had failed in his attempt to break through, and his cultivation level had regressed back to the first layer of element gathering tier. So how could she simply watch as Ling Han went to battle against an elite martial artist in the third layer of Gushing Spring Tier? Ling Han laughed and pulled her to one side. He said with a smile, "Didn't you see that even Big Brother Guang did not step out? What are you in such a rush for? I can easily take care of such a minor character." "That's right. You can just hand over such a minor character to the brat," Guang Yuan said casually. "There's something a little strange about this, brat. No, something very strange." He kept feeling that there was something off about Ling Han, though he did indeed only have one origin nucleus. But for some reason, the feeling he sensed from Ling Han had far surpassed element gathering tier. Hearing him say so, Liu Tong finally calmed down slightly and obediently stepped to one side. She believed that with a powerful martial artist in spiritual ocean tier here, even if Ling Han did come to be in any danger, Guang Yuan would still be able to save him in time. Zhu Wujiu had still kept his head raised high. One should be responsible for what he had done. Yet he was once again flung to one side with a smack from Ling Han, and stared at Ling Han sullenly. "An underling like you is really blind. Can't you see that I'm going to show off my might? Do you want to snatch a chance to show off like this from me? Just look at Big Brother Guang Yuan. He's much smarter," Ling Han berated jokingly. "Pay." Guang Yuan immediately spat in scorn. He only felt it was beneath him to make a move. A junior merely in the third layer of Gushing Spring Tier, one finger from him would be enough to force him into submission. But from Ling Han's words, this lack of action from him was supposedly him being obedient, making him irritated. "Are you done with your chit-chat?" Nan Gongxing asked through his gritted teeth. This was the Huyang Academy, and the Discipline Committee had the highest authority here. Yet these two people actually dared to banter and joke around in front of him. That was disregarding and disrespecting him too much, wasn't it? "Are you in such a rush to get thrashed? All right, come on then." Ling Han crooked his finger. "Ling Han, this had nothing to do with you in the first place." Nan Gongxing said darkly, but you are the one who insists on being such a busybody. People like you usually die very quickly. Is that any of your business? Ling Han gave him the middle finger. Fuck! Nan Gongxing could not hold himself back anymore. He suddenly leaped forwards and struck with a stab. The cold light of the sword flickered like lightning, shooting towards Ling Han's chest. Ling Han smiled calmly. He gave a casual grab, and it was as if Nan Gongxing was cooperating with him as the blade of his sword was successfully caught in Ling Han's hand. Everyone was astonished. With Nan Gongxing's ability in the third layer of gushing spring tear, his sword should be like a lightning strike. Ling Han should not be able to even see its trajectory. What more grab it with his bare hand? However, what use was there for him to grab onto it? The power of the third layer of gushing spring tear was instilled into the sword, and he only needed to give it a light tremble, and he would be able to slice off Ling Han's fingers. You are looking for death. Indeed, Nan Gongxing humphed coldly and was just about to twist his sword. But his expression immediately changed because it was as if the sword in his hand was firmly rooted in Ling Han's hand. No matter how much strength he used, it did not move in the slightest. How could that be? He was merely in the first layer of element gathering tear. How could he possibly have such terrifying strength? Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Let me give you a warning. Let go of your sword to avoid a little bit of suffering. Hang, if the sword exists, so does the swordsman. If the sword dies, so does the Nan Gongxing was still trying to be brave and say a few beautiful words when he suddenly released a shrill scream and hurriedly let go. There was actually a patch of bright red on his palm visible, as if he had burnt his palm. This was because Ling Han had made use of his strange fire and had transmitted the high heat through the blade. Thankfully, it had passed through the blade. Otherwise, if he was directly burnt by the strange fire, his whole palm may be burnt into charcoal. Nan Gongxing glanced around, and everyone was looking at him strangely, causing him to flush uncontrollably. He stared at Ling Han and asked, "Ling Han, do you insist on shielding this person? Is there something wrong with your ability to understand? He is my lackey and is under my protection. If you want to challenge him, I will not interfere. But if you intend to use some kind of unjust means to bully my lackey, then don't blame me for being aggressive." Ling Han said, "This person has crippled my brother. Should he not be punished by the academy?" Nan Gongxing said sharply, "That only means that your brother got his just deserts. I believe that you yourself should be aware of the enmity between him and Nan Gongji. If you want to get your revenge, that's fine. Zhu Wujiu can accept your challenge. Yet you want to use your connections as an intimidation tactic? Get lost." Ling Han said coldly, "Ling Han, what you're doing now is opposing the Huyang Academy." Nan Gongxing spat out word by word, his face ashen. Ling Han shrugged and said, "So what if I am? Anyways, even if more elites come, there would still be Big Brother Guang here." Hey. When did I say I wanted to help you oppose the elites of Huyang Academy? Guang Yuan waved his hands hurriedly. Big Brother Guang Yuan is really modest. Isn't it just a small matter of stretching out a hand for you? Ling Han said with a smile. However, Guang Yuan kept shaking his head in refusal. The Huyang Academy had powerful martial artists of spiritual pedestal tier in their ranks. Only if he had gone crazy would he dare to step out to oppose this kind of existence. Yet, Nan Gongxing still knew that he was not able to apprehend Zhu Wujiu at this moment. So he said hatefully, "This matter will not be settled so easily. Ling Han, even if the Academy does not pursue the matter, my Nangong clan will not give up." "Are you threatening me?" Ling Han's eyes frosted over. "So what if I am? The thing I hate most is being threatened." Ling Han walked towards Nan Gongxing. "Against such people, my usual procedure is to thrash them till they submit. You may be too confident in yourself." Nan Gongxing smirked. I don't know what means you used just now, but after I have experienced a loss, I will not fall to the same trick a second time. Is that right? Ling Han drew his sword. He could take advantage of this chance to try out the power of the Black Origin sword technique. Hopefully, he could control his power and avoid crippling Nan Gongxing with a single strike. Give me a sword. Nan Gongxing stretched out a hand to one side, and immediately someone drew his own sword and handed it over to him. With a flourish of the sword, he said, Then let me show you the might of the 7-wonder sword technique of my Nangong clan. Ling Han laughed and held his sword level. The tip of the blade was slightly lowered, and suddenly one wave of power after another spread out from the tip, as if a pebble had been cast into a lake, creating ripples. The waves spread out, and Guang Yuang, who had been wearing an absent-minded expression, immediately became solemn. Then his expression changed dramatically, and he looked extremely shocked. He had not seen the real might of this sword technique yet, but just looking at the stance, he experienced the feeling as if a storm was coming. If this technique was used, it would definitely be earth-shattering and incomparably terrifying. What kind of sword technique could this be? And how could it actually appear in the hands of a martial artist in element gathering tier? A layer of cold sweat immediately appeared on Nan Gongxing's face, and beads of sweat continuously dripped down his face. His body was trembling, as if he was about to fall apart. Chapter 208. Chapter 208. Kanyi. Reverie _ The opponent was already subdued without unleashing the attack. Nan Gongxing didn't dare to move a single bit. He felt as though if he were to move slightly, it would incite an attack like a thunderstorm from his opponent, and he definitely wouldn't be able to block it. This perception of it made him completely hopeless. His opponent was only a mere element gathering tier, but how could he pressure him so utterly? Ling Han unleashed his sword with a slash. 9 swords made of origin energy shot up into the air like the rising sun, radiating and harsh to the eyes. Nan Gongxing's body was instantly struck flying, and he fell onto the ground with a thud, blood oozing out from his chest. Guang Yuan's eyes opened wide, clearly saw the strike this time. Ling Han's attack sent out 9 sword lights, and each sword light condensed from spiritual qi into a sword of origin energy. This was a bit surprising, but it wasn't unacceptable. What was surprising was that the power of each sword of origin power reached the level of Ling Han's full-strength attack. In other words, in that instant, it was equivalent to 9 Ling Hans attacking Nan Gongxing. How could Nan Gongxing block it? He couldn't help but think, if it were him, how would he fend off this attack? The answer surprised him, could only rely on power that far surpassed Ling Han's and send Ling Han flying with attacks covering a large area, so as to avoid confronting the attack head-on. In short, at the same tier, he wouldn't be able to block this strike. How could it be so terrifying? Cough! Cough! Nan Gongxing fell onto the ground, spitting out blood continuously. Ling Han already held back in his attack, but it still heavily injured him. The others were speechless. Was this really the cultivation of first layer of the element gathering tier? The first layer of the element gathering tier could be this fierce. Ling Han sheathed his sword and said dismissively, "Take him away! Don't let him lie here like an eyesore." Nan Gongxing let out a hacking cough, and another mouthful of fresh blood came out. So he didn't even count as an opponent in Ling Han's eyes. As he was carried away by the masses, his gaze was fixed on Ling Han. This definitely won't be over so easily. It definitely won't. Young Master Han, Zhu Wujiu, didn't know what to say. Although he was moved that Ling Han shielded him, he saw it as pointless. How could an element gathering tier martial artist go against Huyang Academy? He certainly disobeyed the Academy's rules. If you exploited your strength to act violently, then I obviously wouldn't help you. Ling Han looked at him and continued in a dignified tone. But Nan Gongji deserved to be punished, so I support you on this case. Zhu Wu Jiu grit his teeth. If the academy sought someone to blame, he would definitely take on all the charges and not involve Ling Han. Guang Yuan watched in amusement. According to his previous impression, Ling Han was just a nouveau riche that brandished money to such extreme degrees that earth and water faction could only lower their head. Now it appeared that this guy was also hot-headed, daring to confront Huyang Academy head-on. Could earth and water faction even compare to Huyang Academy? However, this guy seemed to also have a strong network even the Imperial Guards had to give him face. It was not as though he were completely reckless. He couldn't help but let out a smile. This youngster was interesting, and he wanted to see how Ling Han would handle things hereafter. Ling Han suddenly turned his head and looked far away. A youngster approached, his left shoulder empty, obviously missing a limb. In Huyang Academy, there were only 2 people who had lost their left arm, Feng Luo and Ken Yi. However, Feng Luo was missing his right arm. The person here still had a perfectly fine right arm, so there was only one possibility. One of Huyang Academy's 3 great core disciples, Ken Yi, who Lianguang Zhu personally instructed. Teacher and master. That was a completely different concept. Teachers took the academy's salary, instructed the students' cultivation, and taught what was universal to the academy. What about a master? It was one who imparted with great care their entire life's leanings. The intimacy of such a relationship was like that of father and son. Lianguang Zhu had only one disciple, and that was Ken Yi, a crippled youngster. Ken Yi approached slowly, carrying a long saber on his back. His gaze was sharp like an exceptional saber unsheathed, which gave the feeling that even if a large mountain blocked his path, he would be able to split it open. He has the presence of a master. Guang Yuan said surprisingly. Kan Ye's cultivation level was not worth mentioning, but that presence somewhat moved him. Ling Han also nodded. He was optimistic about this youngster who had the potential to become a saber master. This feeling was something he felt from Sword Emperor and Twilight Saber Emperor. But Ken Yi was still too inexperienced, showing only the first signs of such a possibility. That attack, just now, it's strong. Ken Yi looked at Ling Han with an intense urge to fight. You want to spar? Ling Han broke into a wide grin. This guy's not bad. He already had the thought of taking him under his wing. Ken Yi pondered, then said, Against that move, I'm only 10% confident of neutralizing it. He paused, and then said, If I study the method of neutralization by pondering it for 3 days, I would have the assurance of 30%. He was quite honest. Then let us battle 3 days later? Ling Han said with a smile. Ken Yi shook his head and said, Your cultivation level is too weak. I can split you in 2 with 1 strike. You simply have no chance to unleash your sword. This was quite honest, but too honest that it was uncomfortable to hear. Ling Han laughed mischievously, then said, Let's make a bet. Bet what? Ken Yi asked. Let's fight, and if you can't beat me, then you'll be my sidekick, Ling Han said. You won't suffice as my opponent. You're only going to be cut down by a single slash, Ken Yi said coldly but with surety, emotionless like a saber. That may not be. Ling Han laughed. Let's fight, and if I get killed by you, then that's my fate. If I don't die, then you'll be my sidekick. Ken Yi made him think of Twilight Saber Emperor. Perhaps, one day, this guy really might become the second Saber Emperor. Ken Yi pondered it, then said, Whenever I attack, I never hold back, and you really will die. I'm not afraid of death, so what are you afraid of? Ling Han cracked a smile. Come, and submit as my sidekick. Ken Yi looked confusedly at Ling Han. No matter how he looked, his opponent had no sliver of a chance to survive. He was naturally indifferent, not only neglecting social intercourse, but also life. In his eyes, a person's life was no different than a dog's life. Since that was so, he spoke no more and unleashed his saber. With the long saber in hand, his temperament instantly changed drastically from a cold, crippled youngster into a reaper. Those cold eyes and imposing, murderous spirit shocked even Guang Yuan a little as the latter involuntarily cracked his fingers, feeling an impulse to kill this youngster as he felt danger. Ling Han! Lu Yutong called out lightly of nervousness. Hu Niu's eyes shone brightly. Kan Ye's murderous spirit made her feel a wisp of intimacy, but when she found that this murderous spirit was directed at Ling Han, the little girl instantly erupted fiercely, growling at Kan Ye. Niu, this opponent is mine. Ling Han smiled and brandished his sword with a move reminiscent of a flower, his expression solemn. Kan Ye was certainly strong, even he had to be cautious. Chapter 209. Chapter 209, Getting an Underling. It was as if the killing intent emanating from Kan Ye had solidified. Even a person with a strong will would shiver at this feeling. Yet his eyes were still very clear, as if they were the eyes of a pure infant, and somehow these two contradicting auras were merged into one. That was because he was a born saber wielder. He drew his saber merely to defeat all opponents in front of him, in order to reach the highest point on the path of the saber. Ling Han only felt such an aura on the setting Sword Saber Emperor before. This did not mean that Kan Ye was definitely able to become the second setting Sun Saber Emperor, but he at least had the potential toif he was able to develop, just like how the setting Sun Saber Emperor had developed. But if he stayed for his whole life in Rain Country, then spiritual pedestal tier would definitely be the highest point he could reach. Ling Han moved his sword very slowly, and because he was resisting the killing intent exuding from Kan Ye, beads of sweat rolled down his forehead uncontrollably. If they fought on the same level, then it was unknown which one of them would win. What more when Ling Han had a much lower cultivation level than his opponent? So, naturally he was under extreme pressure. But the more pressure he felt, the brighter Ling Han's eyes became, as if his gaze could shoot through the skies. These two maniacs, monsters! Guang Yuan was secretly dumbstruck. A thought rose up in his midriff. He suppressed his cultivation level to the same level that these two people were on. He would definitely not have the courage to battle with either one of them. Merely the aura they exuded was enough to make anyone lose hope. Kan Ye never spoke falsehoods. When he had made his move, he slashed out with his saber, and the cold light of the saber swept towards Ling Han like water. Indeed, he would not be giving Ling Han any chance to gather power and use that sword style he had seen just now. In his eyes, as long as anyone forced him to draw his saber, then that was an enemy of his, and he was the type to use full effort against his enemies, completely destroying them. And that meant death. Though his eyes were still clear, with no hint of killing intent, the saber he had slashed out was like the god of death who had raised a sickle, ready to harvest a human life. Indeed, Ling Han did not continue to use that move, because he would be sliced in half before his move was even 1/3 complete, and his blood would spill in all directions. But this was what he had expected. He stretched open his left hand, and a black light gushed out to actually become a screen in front of him. Then it wrapped around his whole body to become a ball. Pum! This slash hit its target, but the black-colored ball was extremely sturdy and it was not sliced open. However, due to the powerful shockwave, the ball and Ling Han, who was still inside, was also flung upwards. The ball actually transformed in midair. It quickly stretched open and actually became a large umbrella, instantly slowing down the speed at which Ling Han was dropping to the ground. Like a deity, Ling Han slowly floated down from the air and firmly stood on the ground. The black-colored gigantic umbrella was instantly withdrawn and became a bangle that wrapped around his wrist. With a cough, Ling Han still spat out a mouthful of blood, though he had used the blood-sucking origin gold to cleverly disperse the force behind this attack. He had still suffered a heavy attack when the slash fell on him, causing his internal organs to jolt, which was a very horrible feeling. In comparison, Qin Yi was really much more powerful. Previously, one strike from Ling Han was enough to defeat Nan Gongxing, but now he was not able to even take a single slash from Qin Yi if he had merely depended on his own power. Though Qin Yi's cultivation level was higher and had reached the 5th layer of Gushing Spring Tear, it could be easily seen the level of talent that this young man had in the way of the saber. There was such a way too. Guang Yuan and Lu Yutong were both staring with wide eyes. Even with their sharp eyes, they were still unable to deduce what means Ling Han had used to disperse this attack of Qin Yi's. What kind of spiritual tool was that? It looked very awesome. Ling Han quickly recovered. He had the body of dead tree, and furthermore, with the indestructible heaven scroll circulating in his body, he would be able to recover as long as he was not dead, no matter how serious his injuries were. He smiled softly and asked, "Little lackey Qin Yi, are we going to continue?" Qin Yi stood with his saber in hand, but his eyes were closed. After pondering for a moment, he opened his eyes, shook his head, and said, "No, I am not able to unravel that move of yours just now." Though he himself said he was not able to unravel the move, his expression was extremely calm. It was as if he would experience no joy from winning nor sadness from losing, and possessed a terrifying calmness about him. "Then you'll be my lackey from now onwards," Ling Han said with a smile. "Not bad, not bad." He managed to get a lackey with boundless future prospects. He really should drink some wine to celebrate. Qin Yi thought for a moment, then said, "When I am able to unravel that defensive move of yours, I will once again challenge you. If you win, I will continue to listen to your commands. If not, you will lose your life." "That's fair." Ling Han grinned. Qin Yi nodded and said, "Then I'll leave first. If there's anything, just blow this whistle, and I will rush over at the first instant." He waved his hand and tossed a whistle over to Ling Han. Ling Han caught it, and could not help but look at him strangely. "Were you born in the year of the dog? You can actually be summoned with a whistle like a dog. Brat, you're really sly, to actually use such a shameless method to deceive a genius of saber arts." After Qin Yi had left, Guang Yuan immediately jumped out and exclaimed at Ling Han. Ling Han pushed him aside and said, "What do you mean by deceive?" "Deceive your sister. I had used real power to subdue that brat, but if you're not convinced—" Guang Yuan laughed and said, "So what if I am not convinced? Unless you want to fight with me and force me into submission? If you're not convinced, the door is there. Just go out and turn right. Godspeed, and I won't bother to see you out," Ling Han said lazily. Instantly, Guang Yuan lost all the wind in his sails. He still had to depend on Ling Han to guide him in his cultivation of the large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll. What more, when the large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll he had obtained was not the complete version. He still needed Ling Han to help him to fill in the blank spaces for him. If he really went out and turned right, then everything would be gone. "Hey, I am a spiritual ocean tier elite after all. Shouldn't you respect me a bit more?" he said faintly. Ling Han immediately felt an urge to throw up and said, "Big brother Guang, don't be so sickening." Guang Yuan laughed loudly. He was not a spiritual ocean tier martial artist from one of the clans, but a lone cultivator, so he knew when to retreat and when to advance, and was definitely not the type to place his pride over everything else. If it had been one of the spiritual ocean tier elites from one of the clans, they would have definitely left in a huff after being forced by Ling Han like that just now. Then he sighed and said, "That brat just now was really not bad. He's a natural genius of martial arts. Unfortunately, he is a saber wielder. If he wasn't, I would really consider taking him in as my disciple. Thank goodness, he is not an expert in using his fists. If you really did take him in as a disciple, you would have definitely been beaten into pulp by Lian Guangzhu." Ling Han snickered. Guang Yuan was shocked and asked, "That brat is Lian Guangzhu's personal disciple?" "Exactly." Guang Yuan was at a loss for a moment before he suddenly jumped up and moved to strangle Ling Han. "You stupidly bold guy. You actually deceived Master Lian's personal disciple into becoming your underling. If this was found out by Master Lien, he would definitely kill you, and even I will be dragged into the matter." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "That's all right. At that time, I will definitely shove all the blame onto Big Brother Guangyuan. Who would believe that I, who is merely in the first layer of element gathering tier, would have the ability to accomplish such a feat?" Guangyuan only felt like he wanted to raise his head and moan to the heavens. He felt like he had never had the upper hand in his exchanges with Ling Han. On the other hand, he was always led around by the nose by Ling Han. He wore a strange expression and asked, "Are you really in the first layer of element gathering tier?" "Exactly." Ling Han smiled slightly. "Fuck, if I believed your words, then I'd be a dumb pig," Guangyuan exclaimed as he spat on the ground. Chapter 210. Chapter 210. Devil Sky Mystery Realm. Reverie _ One origin nucleus had to be the first level of element gathering tier, no matter where one was. However, only Ling Han himself knew just how large the origin nucleus within his dantian was, and how shockingly fast it churned. The nucleus provided origin power far surpassing that of ninth layer of element gathering tier, even comparable to that of first layer of gushing spring tier. That boy just now is certainly a genius martial artist, but you kid are just a freak of a martial artist, Guangyuan concluded. Ling Han shrugged, but didn't deny it. A heaven-tier spirit entered this body. Of course he's bound to be a freak. Also, this lord has no younger sister. So stop it with the your sister crap, Guangyuan said casually. PFF. Ling Han burst into laughter and patted Guangyuan on the shoulder, then said, "Who would have thought old brother Guang had such a sense of humor? Not bad, not bad. You've got a good mentality, which will be more suitable for breaking through to higher tiers." Guangyuan guffawed, feeling as though his mind was really much younger. However, only after Ling Han turned to enter the room did he realize that he and Ling Han were really harmonious, as if the two had no difference in status. One had to know the rigidity of the tiers in the martial arts world. Even a middle stage element gathering tier and an early stage element gathering tier had a chasm between them. Moreover, the two in question were separated by two great tiers. How could they get along as equals? For example, earlier, when Ling Han patted his shoulder, not to mention an element gathering tier, even if an early stage spiritual ocean tier person did that, it would have still enraged him and he'd send the person flying with a slap. And he wouldn't even care about the aftermath. The life and death of the miserable guy would be based on their luck. He unexpectedly let Ling Han pat his shoulder and had a good talk with him, as if he really treated Ling Han as an equal. This kid's got a weird charisma that made me involuntarily forget his age and tier in cultivation, Guangyuan concluded and then muttered, "In short, this guy's a monster." This feeling wasn't Guangyuan's alone. The eldest imperial prince and the third imperial prince, who had royal blood and cultivation in far higher tiers, still referred to Ling Han as brother, didn't they? Admittedly, Ling Han's background was in play, but his charisma was also affecting the two princes, earning their respect from the bottom of their hearts. Nangongxing was beaten, and the discipline committee was obstructed. This was supposed to be a big incident, but it involved Ling Han, so it turned from a big incident into a small one. No one brought up seizing Zhu Wujiu again, and of course no one said anything about punishing Ling Han. However, this was only a tacit state of affairs. Zhu Wujiu was fine if he stayed near Ling Han or the latter's quarters, but once he left or became isolated, then he'd definitely face the discipline committee's arrest. After all was said and done, this was only to give Ling Han face. A student could receive such face. How shocking was that? Zhu Wujiu and Guangyuan settled in the courtyard. First of all, they were both men. Second of all, Guangyuan kept watch, so the discipline committee wouldn't dare act rashly. Third of all, well, Guangyuan could give some pointers to Zhu Wujiu, saving Ling Han some work. This caused Guangyuan to bawl in anger. He felt that when he became Ling Han's underling, he only had to be a bodyguard, But why was he now instructing someone's cultivation? In the future, could he be forced to raise kids? 2 days later, Lu Yutong and Li Sichan hurried over. Just from the look of the two girls' expressions, something big definitely happened. Devil's Sky Mystery Realm opened, the two girls said at the same time. Finding that they synchronized, they inevitably shot a glare at each other. What Devil's Sky Mystery Realm? Ling Han looked confused. Mighty men exist who can sever the area we live by supreme mystical arts, forming a small world that is isolated from the normal world. We call it Mystery Realm, Lu Yutong explained. She knew that Ling Han came from a small place, Gray Cloud Town. Even though he was an alchemy genius, he definitely didn't understand anything about mystery realms. Ling Han obviously knew what mystery realms are, but he had never heard of Devil's Sky Mystery Realm. However, with his abilities in the previous life, he was still unable to separate a part of the world to form a smaller world. Therefore, this was definitely only possible for a mighty shattering void tear. Unfortunately, even though he entered many historic sites, he never had a chance to enter a mystery realm. It was rumored, a mere rumor, that Heaven's Sword sect Sword Emperor belonged to was located in such a mystery realm. Devil's Sky Mystery Realm is an extremely large mystery realm that is hidden in Rain Country and Fire Country, and so on within the 9 nations of the desolate north. It's possible that the entire mystery realm is comparable to Rain Country's territory in size. It is layered in a mysterious way, hidden in the world we live in. Lu Sichan also started to explain, her eyes filled with utter admiration. This was a supreme handiwork that could separate a large space from the real world, layer it and hide it. The thought of it was bewildering. Devil's Sky Mystery Realm's original master died long ago, so the mystery realm isn't controlled by anyone. After a certain amount of time, a door will appear that will accept people. Lu Yutong followed hand in hand with Li Sichan, unexpectedly well coordinated. The opening time is not fixed. Sometimes it appears once in several hundred years, and sometimes it appears once every few decades, Li Sichan said. The last time Devil's Sky Mystery Realm opened was 300 years ago. Devil's Sky Mystery Realm has a decent amount of ancient arts and skills, and with enough luck, one may find them. It's said the family that started the 9 nations of the desolate north was the first to enter Devil's Sky Mystery Realm, and they obtained large amounts of arts and skills. Subsequently, they quickly surpassed others, rebuilding the desolate north rampant with monsters into one that was suitable for humans to live in. It is indeed so. I have seen my family's historic records with such a written account. There's more. Inside the mystery realm there are godly pills. Someone entered as a normal element gathering tier, but came out as a shocking spiritual pedestal tier. Inside Devil's Sky Mystery Realm wait great opportunities. Both girls concluded at last. But Lu Yutong immediately continued. Devil's Sky Mystery Realm is not just about opportunities. It's rumored that when the original master of the Mystery Realm died, the master's body was invaded by evil chi, turning the master into a terrifying blood zombie. Every once in a while, when it opens, it's actually because it needs to feed on blood. Yes, that's why there are rules that when people enter, they must head to the center hall's suppression stone tablet and pour some blood on top of it. 1,000 years ago, everyone wished someone else would pour their blood. As a result, the blood sacrificed was insufficient, and a blood zombie appeared inside the mystery realm, sweeping across the 9 nations of the desolate north. In the end, flower blossom tier cultivators from the 9 large countries showed, giving up their lives to destroy the blood zombie, Li Sichan said. Ling Han showed an interested expression and muttered, "Blood zombie?" He's never heard of a mystery realm like this that required blood sacrifice from those who entered. Normally, when a blood sacrifice was needed, there were only 2 possibilities. First, to nurture a great devil's body with blood, like blood-sucking origin gold. Secondly, to either break or strengthen a seal. Could it be that inside the mystery realm resides the subdued origin gold giant? he suddenly had a bold guess. Chapter 211. Chapter 211, Setting Out. Ling Han had seen a small fragment of that great battle from the memory shards of the blood-sucking Origin Gold and could confirm one thing, and that was that giant form of Origin Gold had definitely been defeated. According to his deduction, that giant should have been dismembered, with its parts scattered in all directions. However, there were other possibilities as well. For example, that giant of Origin Gold might only have had some portion of its body torn off while the majority of its body was still unscathed. If that was the case and the giant of Origin Gold had been suppressed within the mystery realm, then it would not be strange for a broken piece of its body to have appeared in Rain Country. Of course, the chances of this possibility were very low, pitifully low. But when he thought about how terrifying the giant of Origin Gold was, Ling Han still decided to venture into the Devil's Sky mystery realm to take a look. If the giant of Origin Gold was indeed sealed within, then he must ensure that the seal was being strengthened and not weakened. So many years have already passed. Even a monster like that Origin Gold giant should have died by now, right? Ling Han reassured himself in this way. However, in the case of an existence like the Origin Gold giant, even if it had indeed died of old age, its immortal body could still give birth to a second life, though it would be a completely different person. Whatever the case, there was definitely a need for him to go to this Devil's Sky mystery realm. How do you enter the Devil's Sky mystery realm? He questioned. It's very easy. After the mystery realm has opened, teleportation doors will appear in various places. Once one passes through these doors, he will have directly entered into the Devil's Sky mystery realm, Lu Yutong said. She paused for a while, then continued. The reason why we know that the mystery realm has opened is precisely because the doors have appeared. 3 doors have appeared in Rain Country this time. The nearest one is 300 miles east of the Imperial City, Li Sichan said. Ling Han nodded, then asked, in the Devil's Sky mystery realm, aside from Blood Zombie, what other danger is there? The humans who used to live there have long perished, but there are still some demonic beasts within. Moreover, they seem to be trapped inside, and there is no way to bring them out either. Additionally, we also have no means to stay too long inside. After a certain period of time, we will automatically be ejected out of the mystery realm, Lu Yutong answered. According to rumors, there is a terrifying creature in the deepest parts of the Devil's Sky mystery realm. That area is forbidden. We will only be touring around the outer boundaries. The mystery realm has only appeared after such a long time, so there must definitely be a large number of spiritual herbs that have already matured. They are our main targets, Li Sichan said. Lu Yutong nodded in agreement. As far as cultivation and martial arts techniques went, after so many generations of being harvested, it was practically impossible that there would still be any left. But it was different in the case of spiritual herbs. They could harvest a batch this time round, and the next appearance would probably be at least dozens of years later. Especially this time. It has only reappeared after 300 years, so there must definitely be a large amount of spiritual herbs just waiting to be harvested. What are the restrictions for entering the Devil's Sky mystery realm? Ling Han continued to ask. In simple words, the lower your ability, the easier it would be to enter. However, every time is different. Sometimes even spiritual pedestal tier elites could enter. But there were also times when even gushing spring tier martial artists were unable to enter, Lu Yutong said with a shake of her head. Ling Han thought for a moment, then felt that it was all right. Firstly, he had not offended any spiritual pedestal tier elites. Secondly, if even spiritual ocean tier elites could enter, he still had Guang Yuan by his side. Thirdly, if only those in gushing spring tier and below could enter, then he had completely no fear. Even if he encountered such elites like Qin Yi and the eldest imperial prince, he would at least have the ability to keep his life. Moreover, wasn't Qin Yi currently his underling? Not long after, the Huyang Academy made an announcement commanding all students to immediately set off and enter the Devil's Sky mystery realm. Meanwhile, those who would be entering the center hall to sacrifice some of their blood were given the first priority. If too little blood was sacrificed, then a blood zombie would appear to spread ruin and destruction in the world, and by then who knows how many would die. Very soon, Qi Yongyi, Li Dongyu, Jin Wuji, Bailey Tingyin, and the others all raced over to Ling Han's place. They had all come from the Diyuan city, so they were naturally intending to form a group and help each other. Brother Ling, your cultivation level, Qi Yongyi was the first to notice, and could not help but be extremely shocked. Why has it regressed back to the first layer of element gathering tier? Jin Wuji and the others all respectively sensed for Ling Han's aura, and indeed, there seemed to be only one origin nucleus. Disbelieving expressions, too, appeared on their faces. They had only heard of people being stuck on a cultivation level and being unable to break through for a long time. But this was the first time they had seen a person's cultivation level actually drop to such a drastic level. Ling Han laughed and naturally offered no explanation. He said, "Since everyone's here, then let's set out." Qi Yongyi and the others were aware as well that Ling Han was very awesome in the field of alchemy. In the Diyuan city, he was already able to subdue 3 black-grade alchemists, and now he was even more awesome as even black-grade middle-level alchemists revered him. From this aspect, what difference did it make whether Ling Han's own cultivation level was a bit lower or a bit higher? They all set out. Ling Han also dropped by at the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion and invited Li Hao as well. It was only then that the group finally left the imperial city and headed east. On their journey, more and more people appeared. The Devil's Sky Mystery Realm was not all about good stuff like cultivation techniques and spiritual herbs. It also required a large number of people to make a blood sacrifice. Otherwise, a blood zombie would appear. Thus, no matter how strong or weak anyone was, it was best to donate a bit of their blood for the sacrifice. This was a matter of national importance, and the power of the imperial family was already effectively in action, maneuvering the citizens of various cities to head towards the Devil's Sky Mystery Realm. After half a day, Ling Han's group had finally arrived at the location of the teleportation doors. Rather than calling it a door, it seemed more fitting to refer to it as a standing vortex. There was black-colored light twisting and turning within it, and it was about 10 meters tall. It was an imposing sight. There was no front or back to this teleportation door, no matter which side a person jumped through. He would still immediately disappear as if he had been swallowed whole. Ling Han nodded internally. He had never had the ability to create such a thing in his last life. Only almighty warriors of shattering void tier were capable of that. There were few who could no longer wait and entered, while others were still waiting outside. They seemed to be trying to gather a group. Once a big enough group had appeared, they would enter. And before each of them entered, they would be given a brand and a map. The brand showed that they were citizens of Rain Country, whereas the map was very simple, only marking where the center hall was located. The people of the 9 nations of the desolate north could enter through the teleportation doors that were scattered everywhere, so it was not just limited to the people of Rain Country. For example, Rain Country and Fire Country were neighboring countries, and conflicts would frequently erupt between these 2 nations. It was unknown how many had died in these conflicts after these few thousand years, so the 2 countries have long become deadly enemies. Thus, whenever the citizens of these 2 countries encountered each other, they would definitely attempt to kill the other. This brand was what was used to identify friends and enemies. It was directly branded on one's arm and could last for about a month, so it was more than enough time. The restrictions for the teleportation doors this time were not too low. Even those in spiritual ocean tier could enter, but spiritual pedestal tier martial artists could not. Ling Han, a voice forced out through gritted teeth, was heard, filled with endless hatred. Ling Han turned his head to look, and couldn't help but look strangely at the owner of the voice. Feng Luo, Did this guy have the life of a cockroach or something? He actually appeared again. Moreover, his 2 arms were indeed reattached, but it was obvious they were not very nimble. It seemed like they were simply glued on and hung at his sides, looking very out of sorts. After all, it was already very impressive that they managed to reattach his arms, but if they were still able to move as nimbly as if they had never been sliced off, then that was practically illogical. Chapter 212. Chapter 212. Feng Luo is killed. Hey! Ling Han waved his hand in greeting. At first, Feng Luo already looked like he wanted to devour Ling Han, but when he saw this, he was even more fuming with rage, wanting nothing more than to rush forward and strangle Ling Han to death. However, he did not. Firstly, he was not strong enough, and secondly, he could not raise his arms at all. In fact, if he actually exerted any force through his arms may very possibly simply fall off, so he could only huff in rage. Ling Han, if you dare to enter the Devil's Sky Mystery Realm, that will be the time of your death, he said through gritted teeth. Behind him, the 4 guardian deities took a step forward in unison, looking disdainfully at him out of the corner of their eyes. After not seeing them for over a month, the cultivation of these 4 people actually scurried up another layer and made it to the 2nd layer of gushing spring tear. One had to understand that the higher the cultivation level, the more difficult it was to break through. For example, even for a genius like Lu Yutong, who also possessed the 3 Yin vanishing veins and was cultivating a heaven-grade cultivation technique and also had access to a supply of alchemical pills from Ling Han, she would only advance by 1 cultivation layer after about 2 months. How could these 4 actually manage to stand on even footing with Lu Yutong? Ling Han remembered Feng Yan. This guy was also advancing unbelievably rapidly through the cultivation levels. Could it be that he had discovered an ancient treasure trove, and even those around him could ride on his coattails and get to the top? The 4 guardian deities were all glaring fiercely at Ling Han. Previously, even when the 4 of them combined forces, Ling Han had still managed to capture Feng Luo right in front of their eyes. Thankfully, even when Feng Yan personally appeared, Feng Luo's arms were still not saved, which was what made their fault just that little bit lighter. But this was still a great shame to them. They hated Ling Han deeply, wanting nothing more than to tear him into pieces to wash off this black mark on their reputations. And the Mystery Realm was obviously a very good place to settle personal grudges. It was much too big inside, and there were always chances that one would be separated from their group, and once they encountered him, Moreover, the people of the 9 nations of the desolate north were also able to enter. So even if they killed Ling Han, they could completely push the blame onto the foreign martial artists. Ling Han smiled, but there was killing intent being exuded from his eyes. The first time he met Feng Luo, because the latter had not displayed any killing intent, he only taught him a little lesson, and had not taken the matter to heart. He never thought that this cockroach would have such a long life and would be so annoying. Hunyao stuck out her tongue and made a face at Feng Luo, baring her little canines, seeming very disdainful of him. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Feng Luo, you see, not even my Niao is scared of you. I really don't know what you're so smug about." Qi Yongyi and the others too laughed loudly. Feng Luo trembled in fury. He ground his teeth, then proclaimed, "Ling Han, I swear I will kill all your family members and friends one by one, right in front of you, before killing you." Instantly, Ling Han's face darkened, and an overflowing killing intent was exuded from him. He did not mind playing around with this kind of minor character, could always kill him easily with a single stomp of his foot. But the other actually threatened to kill his family and friends? His strongest character trait was protecting his own people. "You're seeking death." He began to stride towards Feng Luo. "Ling Han, are you tired of living?" The 4 guardian deities all smirked coldly. In their last clash, it was because they had underestimated Ling Han that he had the opportunity to capture Feng Luo and hold him hostage, forcing them to be helpless against him. But this did not mean that Ling Han was able to oppose them in a direct clash. Element gathering tear will only be element gathering tear after all. Get out of my way, smelly pests. Ling Han said coldly, the killing intent exuding from him almost seeming solid. The 4 guardian deities looked angered. This time you have no hostage in your hands, so how are you going to oppose us? Kill him! Kill him! Feng Luo screamed in spite of himself. As Ling Han approached, he could not help but recall the few times he had clashed with Ling Han. How was scared off, kicked away, his mouth full of teeth was smacked out, and finally even his 2 arms were sliced off. As he looked at Ling Han's slender figure come closer, he instantly had a mental breakdown. Kill! Kill him! He wailed, tears and snot pouring down his face. The 4 guardian deities were disdainful of such a hideous display. But who asked him to be Feng Yan's brother? They stared at Ling Han with cold eyes. This was a very good chance for them to act. The one who is going to die today is you, Ling Han said. He moved and actually charged directly towards the 4 guardian deities. Insolence! The 4 guardian deities shouted in rage. This brat had succeeded once in dodging their hands. Could it be he wanted to attempt the same thing again? Did he really think they were idiots? Ling Han, Qi Yongyi, and the others all exclaimed in shock. They never thought that he would be so awesome, and simply clashed head-on with gushing spring-tier elites just like that. Hong, 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 hong. For attacks were simultaneously launched and swept towards Ling Han. This time the 4 guardian deities had all had an upgrade of 1 battle star in their battle prowess, and if the 4 of them joined forces, they were definitely capable of instantly killing any martial artist in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, no matter what kind of genius he was. However, Ling Han was not at the peak period of element gathering tier. Instead, he had transformed 9 into 1, and had successfully captured the evasive one, the 10th layer of gushing spring tier. Ling Han used the exiting cloud steps, and his figure miraculously broke through the combined barrage of attacks of the 4 guardian deities like a ghost and appeared in front of Feng Luo in a flash. He stretched out a hand to grab onto Feng Luo's neck. Save me! Feng Luo shrieked in panic. The 4 guardian deities were both shocked and enraged. They could not imagine how Ling Han had somehow managed to break through their combined attacks, and a thought appeared in their minds. History is probably going to repeat itself. Indeed, they were 1 step too late and were unable to stop Ling Han. They could only watch as Feng Luo was subdued by Ling Han in a single move. Let go of young Master Luo! The 4 guardian deities shouted grimly, yet did not dare make a move, just in case Ling Han would do any harm to Feng Luo. This scene was very familiar, causing their faces to burn as if they had just been given a slap. To actually fall for the same trick twice, were they idiots? Of course not. This was because Ling Han was too powerful for them now. Ling Han did not concern himself with the 4 guardian deities. He merely stared at Feng Luo, then asked darkly, You want to kill my entire family? Ling Han, you will not dare to kill me. If you have balls, you can cripple my arms again. Anyways, my brother will definitely return to save me. Just wait, when my brother comes back, I will definitely massacre your whole family. His fear had reached extreme levels, and Feng Luo simply threw caution to the wind and stared back at Ling Han with fierce eyes. Come on, if you have the balls, cripple me again. If you don't, then you are a fuck grandson. Ling Han, I'm not scared of you. You have no idea what kind of power my brother has obtained, not even the rain. Pooh! A crisp sound was heard, and Feng Luo's head had disappeared as Ling Han had smacked it into his chest. Only after a while could blood be seen gushing out from his neck. A dead silence enveloped the surroundings. Ling Han smacked his hands together and said, The world has finally become quiet. Young Master Luo! The 4 guardian deities all cried out. However, after losing support from Ling Han, Feng Luo's legs swayed a few times, then fell to the ground loudly. Even the head has been stuffed into his chest. How could he possibly still be alive? unless he really was a cockroach. Murder! Murder! Seeing such a scene, immediately some began to cry out. However, though there was a large number of Imperial guards maintaining order here, there were even more people all around, and everywhere was noisy. Not one Imperial guard managed to come over in such a short while. You killed young Master Luo. When my lord returns, he will definitely tear you to pieces, the elephant guardian deity called out sternly. You speak as if I have a very good relationship with Feng Yan. Ling Han shrugged, not taking such a threat seriously at all. Chapter 213. Chapter 213. Little Yi. What's going on here? A few Imperial guards arrived slowly. When they saw a headless corpse on the ground, their expressions immediately changed. They were responsible for maintaining order in this place, and now that someone has died, it would be difficult for them to make their report. Sirs, this man committed murder in public. We implore you, sirs, to act and apprehend him. The 4 guardian deities all pointed at Ling Han. When the Imperial Guard saw Ling Han, they couldn't stop their faces from twitching. They naturally knew who Ling Han was. Their superiors had already commanded repeatedly that they were definitely not to come into conflict with this person. But this brat really caused too much worry. How could he simply commit murder in public? Ling Han scoffed and said, Firstly, there is a need for me to correct you. This is not the Imperial City. As martial artists, it is only a matter of course for us to have conflicts with each other in the wild. Just now, I had a bit of a conflict with that idiot, but in the end, this idiot was really too weak. Just one blow and he was finished. Everyone stared blankly. Indeed, this was not the Imperial City. It was 700 miles away from the Imperial City. It was just the fact that everyone around here had come from the Imperial City, and there were also the Imperial Guards maintaining order here, which led them to still have the mindset that they were in the Imperial City. Fights and battles in the wild were indeed much too common. The number of people in Rain Country who had died because of this every year was uncountable. If each and every case was pursued, then Rain Country would probably be finished because every single party was more or less involved in such battles. However, though that was the logic, why did it sound a bit strange? Don't create any more trouble. Otherwise, we will be placing you under arrest. If anyone dares resist, he will be killed with no exception. One of the Imperial Guards finally decided not to pass judgment on Ling Han's life until he was dead. Agreed. Ling Han raised his hand and said he had already killed the person he wanted to kill, and what'd follow would be the 4 guardian deities going crazy. He had no intention to make a move at all. The 4 guardian deities were so mad they could spit blood. Wasn't this aimed at them? Let's go. We'll go into the mystery realm. Everything will be discussed after my lord returns, the wolf guardian deity said in a low voice. When my lord returns this time, he will be bringing with him supreme authority. Not even if the Rain Emperor appeared would he be able to save this brat. The tiger guardian deity nodded as well. Enter the mystery realm, the elephant guardian deity said through gritted teeth. They had once again failed to protect Feng Luo. Who knows whether or not Feng Yan would vent his fury on them when he returned. Just the thought of him was enough to freeze their hearts in their chests. The 4 guardian deities entered into the mystery realm one by one and instantly disappeared. It was only now that Qi Yongyi and the others sighed in relief. They realized that there was a layer of cold sweat on their foreheads, and they could feel that their bodies were cold. Brotherling, you are really too bold, Bailey Tingyan said, having lingering fear in his heart. He's just a smelly bug. If I've stamped him to death, then I've stamped him to death, Ling Han said unconcernedly. Though Feng Luo is not one to be feared, but Feng Yan, Qiong, you merely began. Who did not know that Feng Yan was extremely influential now? He could practically do anything in the academy, and just the thought of forming a deadly enmity with Feng Yan was enough to scare anyone. Ai, little Yi Yi. Ling Han suddenly waved at someone behind them. Chi Yong-yi and the others all turned around to look and saw that it was a young man who only had one arm. He was only one person with one saber, but it was like he was a master of nature, with a supreme aura circulating around him. Anyone would become extremely insignificant in front of him. Ken Yi, but little Yi. Everyone's expressions became a little strange. Could it be that there was some ambiguous relation that could not be revealed between these two men? Ken Yi walked over and did not show any objection nor discomfort at how Ling Han had addressed him. Only the saber existed in his heart and spirit. So what if the whole world slandered him or spoke ill of him? One slash from him, and everything would be silenced. All right, since everyone in our group is here, let's go. Ling Han said, smiling. When had Ken Yi become one of their group? Chi Yong-yi and the others were all astonished, but they did not say anything more. Instead, they kept close behind Ling Han and walked towards the teleportation door. As for the problem of Feng Yan, it was best to leave it to be discussed later. Xiao! They passed through one by one. Ling Han was carrying Hunyao, and in the instant he passed through the vortex, he felt as if even his soul was about to torn apart. Time seemed to have lost all meaning, forever stagnating in that one moment. He had just barely finished that thought when he suddenly appeared in an unfamiliar world. The green grass was laid out like a mattress, as if it was an ocean. As a breeze blew past, the grass would sway slightly, as if a gentle wave had passed through. There was an indescribable beauty to this place. However, aside from Hunyao, who was carried in his arms, his surroundings were completely empty. There was not even a ghost around. Random teleportation. Ling Han frowned. He had asked many questions, but this was the only thing he had not asked about. In the end, it was an absolute waste for them to have gathered before, and there was no point to it at all. Thankfully, Hunyao was clinging to him all along. Otherwise, who knows where this little girl would be sent to? Without him there to control her, who knows what kind of trouble the little girl would get into, especially with her ferocious nature. Wah! Hunyao jumped down from Ling Han's body. Using all 4 of her limbs, she began to race around madly. She had grown up in the forest since she was a child, and this kind of world was where she truly belonged. Ling Han walked ahead, whereas Hunyao was racing around happily. At one moment, she would be in front of Ling Han, and in the next, she would be behind him. Sometimes she would be to his left, while at other times she would be to his right. Even Ling Han was infected by her happy mood and could not help but smile. Danger! He was suddenly alerted and hurriedly leaped towards Hunyao. Xiao, a small, white creature, suddenly jumped out. It was a rabbit. It had been chewing on the grass, but Hunyao's running around had scared it out, making Ling Han think that it had been an enemy. He smiled and stopped walking. Hunyao, on the other hand, perked up and immediately tried to capture it. She raced after the rabbit, her mouth open wide, and kept trying to bite it. Obviously, Hunyao did not think the rabbit was cute at all and merely thought of it as prey. Xiao, the rabbit, fled very quickly, but Hunyao was not too slow either. She chased after quickly, and Ling Han's yell did not manage to stop Hunyao, so he could only follow at her heels. After a while, the rabbit scrambled into the grass, and there was no sign of it left. It seemed that it had fled into a rabbit's hole. Hunyao immediately began to dig at the ground with both hands, intending to capture this rabbit at all costs. Forget it! Though that little guy is very fat, with your appetite, it's not even enough to be an appetizer. Ling Han picked Hunyao up. The little girl was very displeased, pouting her mouth to show her displeasure. Xiao. It was at this moment that a lot of rabbits jumped out from the rabbit's hole. However, these rabbits were not cute at all. They were as big as dogs and had bright red eyes, exuding a bloodthirsty aura. Damn! Ling Han cursed internally and could not help but be cautious. That was because these rabbits were actually in Element Gathering tier, and there were even 2 of them that were in Gushing Spring tier. 30, 40, 50. their numbers increased further and further. Finally, a giant rabbit that was about the size of a human being jumped out, and this last rabbit exuded an aura that would only come from someone in the late stage of gushing spring tear. Some people would say that they've poked the hornet's nest, but now it's become the rabbit's nest one. Ling Han's eyes swept over, and he had done his calculations mentally. 1 was in the late stage of gushing spring tear, 7 were in the middle stage of gushing spring tear, 21 were in the early stage of gushing spring tear, and there were even as many as 100 rabbits in element gathering tear. He immediately realized there was no way to win, then hurriedly picked up Hunyo and fled. Since there was no way to win, then he'd just have to flee. That was the easiest way out. Chapter 214. Chapter 214, Grassy Plains. There was no other option but to flee. If there were less than 10 of them in the early stage of gushing spring tear, Ling Han could still somehow manage to fight them. But there were about 20 of them here, more than enough to drown him to death. What more when there were some that were in the middle stage and one in the late stage of gushing spring tear? If Ling Han had really charged forwards, that was not called battle. That was called delivering himself up to die. He began to run, while those rabbits behind him refused to give up chasing after him. Previously, it was Hunyo who had been chasing after the little rabbit. Now, their positions were switched, and it was them now who were running like crazy. Hunyo was not anxious at all. She kept smacking Ling Han's shoulder and saying, "Run faster! Run faster!" This little girl. How could Ling Han spare the time to chastise the little girl? He could only channel all his energy into running for their lives. But the rabbit demons were well known for their speed in the first place. What more when there was an old rabbit monster that was in the late period of gushing spring tear? Thus, in just a few moments, they were right behind Ling Han and opened their mouths, ready to bite. As the old saying goes, if forced into desperate straits, even rabbits would bite. The 2 front teeth of that old rabbit demon were like hose, long and sharp, flickering with cold light. Ling Han transformed the blood-sucking origin gold into a shield and blocked this attack. A powerful shock wave shook him, causing him to feel so bad he practically wanted to spit out blood. And with such a pause, the large number of rabbit demons who were right behind had come nearer. From the way things were going now, he would definitely be unable to escape. Ling Han sighed, drew out a swift cloud talisman, and slapped it onto his body. Wang, this ordinary-looking talisman paper suddenly shone brilliantly, and an indescribable power gushed into his body. Xiao, he once again began to run furiously, and his speed had immediately increased tenfold. She. The rabbit demons released squeaks of anger, but Ling Han was getting farther and farther from them. Finally, Ling Han had left them completely behind him, and there was no sign of him left in their eyes. Once a spiritual talisman was used, there would be no way to stop its effects. Ling Han did not want to waste it, so he continued to run forwards, and only when the effects of the swift cloud talisman were completely spent did he stop. He took out an alchemical pill and swallowed it to heal the internal injuries he had suffered when he had clashed head-on with that old rabbit demon just now. The indestructible heaven scroll was circulated, and his injuries were healing at a visible rate. As long as it's not a major injury to my nerves or bones, I would be able to recover my injuries in the time for a cup of hot tea. Ling Han smiled. However, even if I had suffered heavy injuries, I still have a drop of indestructible true fluid. Fun! Hunyo said happily. Little girl, just to let you have a little fun for that short while, I actually used up a swift cloud talisman. Ling Han shook his head, petted Hunyo's head, and said, "This is a very dangerous place. Nyo, be good and don't run around anymore." And Nyo is a good Nyo, will be good. Hunyo nodded her head earnestly, looking very serious. Ling Han laughed. Just now, if Hunyo had not gone to chase after that little rabbit, then would they still have disturbed those demonic beasts when they passed by the lair of the rabbit demons? The answer was, who knows? That was because the rabbits lived underground and were very sensitive to the tremors above the ground. Moreover, those red-eyed rabbits were obviously very ferocious. Perhaps even if they had not disturbed them, they would still have gone berserk. Now, where should we go? He drew out the map. The entire Devil's Sky mystery realm was very big and was rumored to be comparable to a country in size. This map only marked the outermost zone, which was roughly about 1/10 of the area of the whole mystery realm, which also meant that the 9 nations of the desolate north had only managed to make it this far, while the area beyond that was much too dangerous and there was no way to access it. But it was also possible that some great party had made it into a deeper area, but to keep the benefits for themselves, did not share that information with anyone else. This was very possible, because the deeper into the mystery realm, the higher the grade of the cultivation and martial arts techniques would have to be. So why did they have to share that information with others? Why should they not leave it for themselves to exploit? However, the Devil's Sky mystery realm would rarely open, once in dozens of years at least, or a few hundred years at most. This was not very good to arrange. There were some parties that had been extremely influential the last time it opened, but may probably have declined to unimaginable levels the next time it opened. My current location, the outermost zone, is a plain and has been named as the Grassy Plains. As long as I walk towards the center, there will be a ring-shaped mountain, which has a total of 4 ravines through which I can enter, and at the end of every ravine there is a center hall. If I want to enter the deeper areas of the Devil's Sky mystery realm, I must pass through the 4 ravines unless I am able to scale this ring-shaped mountain. However, it is said that this mountain is 1,000 feet tall and is extremely steep, so there's no way to climb up the mountain. Then I should find a ravine first. I am very curious about the depths of this mystery realm. What could be concealed inside? Ling Han looked into the distance, and indeed he was able to see a dark shadow at the horizon. That would be the ring-shaped mountain, and it was so tall that it looked like it was connected to the sky. Let's go. Hunyo acted like an adult, tugged on Ling Han's hand, and walked forwards. They began their advance towards the ring-shaped mountain. Ling Han very quickly discovered that there was no night in here, and though the sky was bright, there was no sun. This was not a complete world. Instead, it was carved out from the real world by an almighty person with supreme methods, so it was naturally not the same as the real world. This was his first time entering into a mystery realm, and he could not help but be astonished, feeling everything was very novel. After journeying for about half a day, the little girl began to exclaim in her hunger. Ling Han was also feeling a little hungry. Thankfully, he had a spatial ring, and had already readied a supply of food which was stored inside. And in order to satisfy Hunyo's monstrous appetite, he had also prepared some demonic beast meat. It was also a piece of meat, but it contained tenfold the energy that could be gotten from eating normal meat. The higher the grade of the demonic beast, the more energy and power was contained in their blood and bones. The little girl had a very big appetite as her body required a colossal amount of energy, but there were also times when she had eaten too much, such as the time when she had eaten the root of that divine medicine. It directly transformed Hunyo into an egg. After eating their meal, they journeyed for a while longer before stopping to rest. They set up a tent on the grass, and after enough sleep, they once again continued their journey. There would be people of the 9 nations gathered here as well, and the highest cultivation level that could enter was spiritual ocean tier. Thus, they had to ensure that they were in prime condition at all times. Otherwise, if they were killed off, whom should they cry out their grievances to? The random teleportation is really detestable. Ling Han sighed. Otherwise, he would have Guang Yuan by his side and would also be able to command Qin, so he would not have to be so cautious like how he was now. Though they could not see the change from day to night here, Ling Han was still keeping track of the passage of time in his heart. After about 3 days, they could finally see the true form of the ring-shaped mountain ahead of them, and not the black lump they had been seeing for the last few days. By this point, there was also gradually more trees, and it was no longer purely grass being the dominant plant species around them. These trees were all purple in color, scattered throughout a green plain that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a unique scenery. "Stand right there." A voice was suddenly heard from the top of a tree. Ling Han raised his head and saw that there was a person hunched down on top. The person was continuously waving a hand at him, signaling at him to stop going forwards. His eyes were sharp enough to see that the brand on the other's arm was the same as his. "Why?" Ling Han questioned. That man looked a bit defiant, but he was more afraid that Ling Han would spoil things, so he could only say, "We are getting ready to kill a fire-eyed bull, and this is the encirclement zone we have set up. That fire-eyed bull is about to be tempted over, and if you enter, you may ruin our plans."